I bought talking buttons for my cat, but the cat wasn't the only one who used them. Written by Let's Split Up. It's actually my youngest son's cat who learned how to use the buttons. I inherited the cat after my son lost control of his car on the icy roads last winter. It happened on the day he received a scholarship to his top college choice. He and his boyfriend were feeling on top of the world and were on their way back home from a trip. His boyfriend survived. He did not. You cannot imagine the grief. Either you have experienced the loss of a child or you haven't. I did not weep, not at the funeral nor for many weeks after. I became a stone, an object. It was as if all the sorrow were locked far from reach. Instead of feeling anything, I simply thought many times of retrieving the pistol that I own from its case in the back of my closet. And on a few occasions, I even went and took it and sat with it, feeling its weight in my hand. My son Vinny to his friends, was my world. One day, he would have been famous, I'm sure of it. You may think that is a father's pride talking, maybe it is, but he had a music scholarship. He would have performed for presidents and world leaders. In my mind, when I see him, it is usually at his piano, playing for his cat. When he was 15, I promised him a kitten if he did well in school. And he picked out this tabby, the tiniest and angriest tabby in the world, and named her Terry. She loved only him and hissed and growled at anyone else who came near, including me. She also peed on his clothes and on mine and on my bed. To say I wanted to get rid of terrible Terry, as I called her, is an understatement. But then, my brilliant son died. And suddenly, it was just me and terrible Terry and the gun. I felt nothing but resentment toward the cat. But she spent hours and hours slouched on the windowsill in his bedroom where she always sat while he played piano. I used to think she sat there to watch the birds and couldn't care less about his playing. Now she didn't even lift her head. She just loafed on the sill, as if waiting for him to come bursting in and pull the dust cover off and play. And there were the buttons. You've seen them, I'm sure. Those gimmicky buttons that people get to train their animals to talk. Bunch of nonsense if you ask me. What has a dog got to say? Nothing but food, probably. And anyway, people are supposed to give commands to dogs, not the other way around. But Vinny would watch all these videos of dogs and sometimes cats pressing the buttons, even though, to be honest, the cat videos he showed me looked like the cats walking onto the buttons completely by accident. And that's what I told him. Complete waste of money. People wishfully projecting their ideas onto their pets. The cat pressed "love you" and meant it. Ha! Cats only know hunger and selfish desires. Well, my stubborn, dreamy-eyed cat-loving son bought a set of those buttons. He pre-recorded dozens of them, but he began with just a handful. Food, cuddle, outside, music, dad, and Vinny. Yeah, he put me and himself as buttons, and music too, because he was convinced in his silly teenaged way that the cat liked his music and might want to request it. Terry was terrified of those buttons. No matter how he tried to train her, she refused to use them. She hissed, she swatted, she wouldn't go near them. She knew exactly what they were there for, I'm sure of it. She even knew the words because he'd say to her, "Let's have some music," and she would go to her perch by the piano and wait for him. But when it came to the buttons, she refused. Terry loved those buttons about as much as I loved Terry. But then, like I said, came the incident. Suddenly, my son was gone. The house felt wrong, empty. Terry was a husk. I put food out, but she didn't eat. I didn't know how to read her signals. She hissed at me if I came near. I decided I should get rid of her. I couldn't keep this cat. The cat hated me anyway. I will get rid of her, I thought, and then I will be done with me too. But I couldn't bring myself to get rid of my son's cat, and I couldn't commit S-word while my cat was still alive. And so we were stuck. Me and the cat. And then one night I was up in my room contemplating S-word when I heard the recorded voice downstairs speak, Vinny. I assumed it must be a mistake. She must have walked over the button, but then it came again. Vinny, Vinny, Vinny. I stood there, listening to that cat press Vinny over and over again, and tears came into my eyes. It was like a key turning in a lock, a crack in the dam that then finally burst. I gasped, loud, gulping sobs. Finally, the tears came from my son, and when the flood was over, I came down and found tiny Terry sitting by the buttons, looking miserable, and I scooped her up and told her I miss him too. And for once, she didn't swat me. She gave only the smallest growl. I put her down and got her some food. Got myself some too. We both ate. That was the beginning. Since then, I've added more buttons. You see, I'm not an animal person. I didn't understand Terry's body language, her wants and needs, without the buttons. She finally started using them, training me. I guess they say cats do that. She has a wet food button, a kibble button. She has a no button to use if I show her the wrong food. I also added from my son's collection the love you button. Yes, I confess, I did add it. And a Terry button. And I began to make a habit of pressing love you, Vinny, and love you, Terry. I was genuinely in shock how much she communicated. The first time she pressed Dad, love you, I almost broke down all over. I couldn't believe it. She looked like she wasn't even trying. She just casually walked over the buttons, but it was deliberate. It happened more than once. I still hadn't learned to read her cat body language at all. But with the buttons, I understood her, and I felt like I had a part of my son with me. Sometimes, she said things that just cracked open my soul, like when she looked at me with those big round eyes one time and hit Vinny home. I wish he was home too, I told her. It was uncanny. The things we could discuss. We'd have entire conversations. I know it sounds nuts. I'd have thought myself nuts just a couple of months before, but I added buttons so fast and she took to all of them. I asked her once if she understands what happened to Vinny. She replied with Vinny bye-bye. I'd added the bye-bye button to tell her whenever I was leaving the house. Then she asked me Vinny home. I had to tell her no. Vinny bye-bye. And she stubbornly insisted again. Vinny home. And she walked away angry, I think, that I couldn't make Vinny come back. But the reason I am sharing this story and sharing this story here is because of what happened last week. Last week, my son Liam came to see me. Liam is Vinny's older half-brother. He's nearly a decade older than Vin from a previous relationship, and unfortunately, Liam inherited all of his mother's worst traits. It is always the same with him. He begs for money, gets abusive if I do not give it, and disappears once I have made him a loan he will never repay. I cut off all funds to him a few years ago and told him I would no longer enable his habits. While I'd never cut him entirely out of my life, I hadn't allowed him to visit when Vinny was alive because of the way he'd treat Vinny on a previous visit, when he'd sneeringly accused me of favoring that menacing little, I won't repeat his hateful words, for his younger brother. When he showed up on my doorstep, he had the smell of whiskey on his breath, and he looked wild-eyed and anxious. "Dad," he said, and then hugged me tight. "I'm sorry about Vin. It shocked me so much, I hugged him right back. And he came in and sat down and asked how I was doing. He was surprisingly solicitous. I didn't understand why. His usual meanness didn't come through at all until he noticed a growling Terry. "You still have that little piss queen?" he asked, and reached a hand for her, only for her to swat and run away. "Little shit," he said. "Her name is Terry," I said defensively. He laughed. "Didn't you used to call her Terrible Terry?" "She doesn't pee on things anymore." From the button area came presses of bye-bye. "She wants you to go bye-bye," I said. "She can fuck off. She's not your son, I am." "Bye-bye." I didn't like the way he talked to the cat. Though a few minutes later, after she peed on his shoes, I found his anger more understandable, and I locked her up to prevent him from harming her. But he seemed genuinely sad about Vinny, and even asked about Vinny's boyfriend and his recovery after the crash. I wondered if he had to come over to try to patch things up between us. Maybe to start off on better footing, like me and Terry had, until he asked me what was going to happen to Vinny's college fund. "I haven't decided yet," I told him. "I'm still processing all of this." "But he's not going to use it, right? I mean, even before the accident, the money you've been saving for him, he had a scholarship, right? He wasn't going to need it, and he definitely won't need it now, Dad. I could use a loan." "Liam, you still have one son left, Dad." He burst, and there was the old rage. "Why do you always treat me like this? Even when he's dead, he still deserves more than I do. I bet you cut me out of your will too, huh?" "I did not." "You didn't?" "No. You both get equal shares." "Oh, okay. He calmed down. "Sorry, I have a lot of resentment, I guess. I'm sorry, but about the loan, is there any way? I'll have to think on it." Okay. You think I'll make us drinks, okay?" I should have known what was happening when he went into the kitchen and was fumbling around longer than necessary. I should have known, but how could I? I had already lost one son. How could I suspect the other? How could I imagine the worst? I wanted to believe things would be better. I drank the alcohol he put in front of me without thinking. I assumed the wooziness was just the booze. It had been a long enough time since I'd had a real drink. Somewhere in the bedroom where she was locked up, Terry was howling her little heart out. I'd never heard her make those sounds and said I was going to let her out, but when I got up, the whole world lurched. Liam's arms caught me and he said, "Got you, Dad," and then kept whispering in my ear, his breath still reeking. Sorry, but you're making me do this. If you just give me that fucking loan." I didn't start to panic, really panic, until he propped me up on the sofa and went upstairs with the question, "You still keep your gun in the closet?" The fear hit me in a wave then. I felt like I was floating, like I was drifting away from my body, like I was lost in some strange and horrible dream. I tried to stand, to stumble to the table and grab my phone, but I fell and heard the crack of my head against the table's edge. The ground came up to meet me. Pain shot through my skull. Footsteps thudded overhead, cursing as he rifled through my closet. I tried to pull myself up again, finally managed to grab my phone. The scream swam in my vision. My fingers were fat and clumsy as I tried to push the keys to call for help. A hand smacked the phone out of my grip. "It's 'cause you won't help me," Liam rambled as he again wrapped his arms around me to try to get me onto the sofa. "Everyone knows you're depressed. Can't handle Vinny's death. You should have just done it, man. If you'd just done it, I wouldn't have to." "Huh," I gasped. "This is the only way. This is how it was gonna be anyway. You don't even want to live anyway. In your own way, you're helping me out here in the end," he said. And then, in response to the howling from the other room, he suddenly shrieked, "Shut the fuck up!" The howling stopped. Liam glared toward the door. his breath coming hard and fast, then looked back at me. Everything had become so blurry. His words were a garble, his features a haze. I felt the cold muzzle of the gun as my heart galloped in my chest. From Vinny's room came a sharp rustle, like a curtain or a sheet. And then the piano, the notes of a piano. The hell? Liam's voice slurred through my drugged haze. Is someone here? The playing continued, unsteady but beautiful, unmistakably Clair de Lune, just like Vinny had always played, but slower, halting. And I wondered, it couldn't be the cat, could it? It almost sounded like the cat walking deliberately across the keys, the same way she walked across the buttons, but that would have been impossible. Who's there? Snarled Liam. Was all I could manage. He snatched up the gun and stalked toward the bedroom door. In my blurry vision, he wavered back and forth, and when he opened the door, there, at the piano, was a figure, flickering and impossible. A figure that both was and was not there. And Liam screamed and raised his arm, and the world exploded as the gun went off. And then there was the howling of the cat, and the cat came charging out, all bristling like a tiger, and with her that same figure from the piano. And Liam was screaming in terror and fired the gun again and ran out the door. What I remember next is waking in the ER. Neighbors apparently called police after hearing the gunshots. When I was discharged and returned home, my head wrapped from the concussion, I was relieved to find Terry whole and alive. She hurried over to greet me, tail up. I'd finally started picking up her body language to know a greeting when I saw it. But it wasn't just the Tabby greeting me I knew. You see, I'd finally realized something. A cat can't play a piano, and this cat couldn't use buttons. Not of her own volition. Maybe it hadn't been Terry talking to me all along. Maybe it was, and always had been, Vinny. And so, as I extended my hand and Terry rubbed my knuckles, I told her, I love you. I won't ever leave you. I promise. I will survive. You can be free. I love you. Terry rubbed my hand again, and rubbed my face when I bent my head to theirs. Then she patted over to the buttons and walked across them, and I listened to my son's recorded voice. Love you. Love you. Bye-bye. Terry hasn't touched those buttons since, but every once in a while, when I'm very deep in dreams, I think I hear the sound of the piano. I found a weird house-sitting ad. It might be the best gig I'll ever get. Written by Sapphire Lion 15. It seemed like easy money. Wanted. Weekend house sitter. 3 days, 2 nights, will pay for food, $500 a day. Call Agatha. I should have been more suspicious, but at the time I was fresh out of college, up to my ears in debt, and barely managing to pay rent every month. I'd been looking for steady work, basically anything that would let me get groceries without filing for bankruptcy. When I saw the ad stapled to a tree on one of the city streets, I'd house sat for friends and relatives before, and the flyer didn't mention anything about pet sitting, babysitting, or anything like that. Plus, the pay would cover next month's rent, and if I did a good job, I might be able to make the gig the regular thing. I called the number, thinking there was no harm in at least making sure the offer was legit. Agatha turned out to be an older woman who answered on the second ring. She understood that the ad seemed too good to be true and told me that she could prove the offer was valid, giving me an address to look up and her full name to Google. I put her on speaker and did so. As it turned out, Agatha had been a pretty big deal 10 years before. She'd been a fashion critic who was well known for her refined tastes and almost supernaturally good predictions about what would be in every season. Upon retiring, she turned into something of a hermit and almost never leaving her house. though the fact that delivery people regularly showed up at her front door proved she was still alive. And she was loaded. Born into a high-class family, she had more money in the bank than some small countries had in their treasuries. While this would be specifically for the weekend, Agatha continued after my Google search, I have a series of trips coming up that I simply cannot put off. If this weekend goes well, I may hire you back for a following weekend for double the current rate. My jaw dropped. I could be making $3,000 in a weekend? At the time, I thought she was either extremely generous or didn't know the value of a dollar. Looking back, I probably should have seen that as a red flag. But I was desperate, so naturally, I accepted the job. I was to arrive on Friday morning, specifically at 10 o'clock sharp. Once I'd stepped through the front door, I wasn't allowed to leave the house again until Sunday afternoon, when Agatha would return. Thus, I was expected to bring everything I would possibly need for my 3-day stay. Odd as I thought that was, I was not about to tick off the lady who could single-handedly end a few of my money troubles. Agatha's house was an absolutely gorgeous mansion. It practically screamed old money. It was 3 stories tall, painted a pristine white, a balcony overlooked the front lawn. The lawn and flower beds were immaculately cared for. A golden statue made up of numerous brass instruments stood proud at the center of the garden. All in all, I was starting to think this gig would be worth it. But I had to pause when I saw the dolls. Standing on poles guarding either side of the porch were 2 gigantic dolls. They looked like they were made of some kind of sackcloth, as their skin reminded me of burlap. Both of them were about 6 feet tall, though the poles they were attached to made them seem at least a foot taller. They didn't have mouths, but there were 2 massive black circles embroidered onto their faces to act like eyes. They had stringy black yarn to act as their hair, though how said yarn hadn't rotted away due to exposure to the elements was anyone's guess. They were made up to resemble a man and a woman. The male doll's yarn hair was made up to look like a mop-top haircut, and he was dressed in a black Victorian-style suit. The female doll was wearing a ballet-style dress with black leggings, and her yarn hair was tied up into a sloppy bun. Both had a very Burton-esque feel to them. As surprised as I was to see the dolls, especially because of how out of place they were, I shrugged and played it off as a weird interest Agatha had. After all, she'd hardly be the first rich person to have an eccentric hobby. Agatha all but pulled me inside when I knocked on the door. She was a sharply dressed woman in at least her late 60s. I noticed that a suitcase was sitting behind her. She looked satisfied to see that I had arrived on time and had a suitcase and duffel with me. "Got everything you'll need?" she asked in lieu of a greeting. "Everything I'll need," I reassured her. Good, very now. On to my taxi here." I looked out the still open front door to see a taxi pull up right beside my beat-up Prius. "I'll pay you what you're owed as soon as I get back," she told me as she picked up her suitcase. "I don't have time to go over everything, so I left a list of rules for you on the kitchen table. Follow it to the letter, and everything will be fine. See you Sunday." With that, she went out the door, shutting it behind her. I blinked, wondering if that was normal behavior to someone leaving their clearly expensive house to a total stranger. Setting my bags down in the foyer, I walked through the gargantuan house until I found the kitchen. As she had promised, a list had been written down. It was written on custom stationery and left next to a sticky note that read, "Please follow all rules." I dutifully read over the list. Some of the instructions were rather self-explanatory, but others were just plain weird. Number 1, please feed the goldfish in the library. The food is in a jar on the cabinet next to the tank. Just 1 pinch a day. Number 2, every night at 9 o'clock sharp, you must be in the living room. staring out the picture window. You must watch everything they do. Do not look away. They like an audience. When they bow to you, clap 3 times and close the curtains. Be sure to open them again in the morning. Number 3. Please don't smoke or vape in the house. If you must, please only smoke or vape on the balcony. Number 4. If you touch any books in the library, please put them back where you found them. Number 5. If you are injured or feel sick, sleep on the couch on the back patio. Be there by 9, and you'll feel better by the morning. Number 6. On Saturday night, leave a paper plate of frozen crinkle-cut carrot slices on the welcome mat. Be sure you do this by 6 o'clock at the latest. Don't worry about getting the paper plate. They never leave leftovers. Number 7. Ross, the gardener, comes on Saturday morning. Jeb, the special gardener, comes every Saturday evening. Do not speak to either of them, and do not let Jeb know I'm not home. Number 8. Do not make any noise while watching them. They will excuse a sneeze or coughing fit, but everything else will make them unhappy. And finally, number 9. The streaming service is yours to use as you like. If you order any pizza or food for delivery, leave a note telling me where it was at and what it cost, and I will cover it. Help yourself to anything in the fridge. The rules about feeding the fish, not smoking, and picking up after myself were easy to understand and follow. Fish were easy to please, and I had never been a smoker, but the other rules were weird. Still, like I said, they were all pretty easy to follow, and Agatha was being more than generous. I decided to just grin and bear it, though I have to admit that the constant mentions of they left me with a knot in my stomach. Friday was spent exploring the house and finding all the rooms listed. The library was on the 2nd floor, right next to my guest room, which looked like a luxury hotel suite. The back patio was a fully covered and furnished deck, with glass doors and windows keeping Mother Nature out and a connected heating and AC unit keeping it comfortable. The living room was a surprisingly big room. You could have parked a car in there and still had room for 10 people. The picture window mentioned in the list was so big it took up most of the wall, and was framed by red velvet curtains, which greatly reminded me of the curtains used in theaters. After a dinner of ordered pizza and a Mountain Dew, I saw that it was 10 till 9. Too curious to disobey, I went into the living room and looked out the picture window. The sun had set by that point, with the porch light and various lights in the garden illuminating the front. Then, at 9 on the dot, just when I was starting to wonder what the big deal was, it happened. The 2 dolls I'd seen earlier jumped off of their posts. There was no warning. One moment they were still and lifeless, and the next they were moving like it was the most normal thing in the world. The male doll offered its arm to the female one, who took it delicately. They walked over onto a bare patch of grass, one right in my line of sight. The male doll touched the statue of the orchestra I'd seen earlier. Eerie, unearthly music filled the air. Then, as I watched, they began to dance. It wasn't a waltz or a salsa or any kind of dance I had seen before, but it was undeniably dancing. They stepped in time to the music, never looking away from one another. At times, the male doll would dip or whirl the female doll around before they began slow dancing once again. My heart hammered as I struggled to rationalize what I was seeing. My eyes were frozen on the pair. Finally, the music tapered off. The dolls stopped their dance and turned to face me. They'd known I was there all along. I was as still as a statue as their black, unreadable eyes focused on me. Then, perfectly in sync, they bowed at me. Remembering the rules, I gave 3 loud claps and closed the curtains as quickly as possible. Then I got out of that room as fast as I could. I made a break for my guest room, avoiding all windows. What if they were still watching the house? And taking these steps 2 at a time. I slammed the door when I got into my room, breathing heavily. Like a scared little kid, I darted under the bed, shaking. How in the name of sanity had that just happened? Did Agatha know it would happen? I had just pulled out my phone in my pocket, wondering what I should do when it buzzed. It was a text from Agatha. I know you must be frightened, but don't be. They only want an audience, nothing more. Just follow the rules and you'll be safe. I sent her a few texts, most of them asking or really begging for answers, but she never replied. I spent most of my night under the blanket in my guest room, hugging my plush sea turtle and not daring to look out the window, lest I see one of the dolls staring at me. Morning eventually came. Exhausted from a fearful, sleepless night, I trudged down the stairs to make some coffee. I froze when I heard someone moving outside, until I remembered the list. One of the gardeners always came Saturday mornings, and I wasn't supposed to speak to them. Tempted as I was to see anyone real, to try and convince myself I wasn't crazy, I decided to abide by the rules, which meant I had to open those living room curtains. I held my breath as I pulled them apart, and wasn't quite sure how I felt when I saw that the dolls were back on their poles, like nothing had ever happened. I had a bowl of cornflakes and a cup of very strong coffee for breakfast, deciding to try and binge comfort films until I could convince myself it had all been some wild dream. Unfortunately, that plan was dashed when, while walking back to the TV room, I tripped on my own discarded sneaker. While my landing was painful, it was nothing compared to the sprained ankle I got in the process. I bit my arm to keep from screaming and managed to hobble back into the kitchen for some ice. I wound up still going on a movie binge, but now it was because I was confined to the couch. I was wondering how I was going to get up the stairs that night if my foot was a mess until I remembered, according to Agatha, I had to sleep on the back patio if I was hurt, which meant that I wouldn't have to see those creepy dolls. While I still didn't know what was going on, I felt much better thinking that I might have a more normal night. I spent the rest of the day following the instructions as best as I could, leaving the chopped carrots on the welcome mat after the special gardener left. I understood why he was the special gardener when I saw him dusting those freaky dolls. After I had fed the fish, I went about my nighttime routine, made more difficult with the busted ankle. By 8:50, I had gotten myself settled on the back patio. The patio's couch was as soft as a bed, and there were enough pillows for me to feel comfortable even after I used 2 of them to prop up my foot. After taking a blanket from the linen closet, I was ready to get a full night's sleep. I had just closed my eyes, starting to drift off, and then I heard it. That eerie, unearthly music. I pulled the blanket over my face, too afraid to think of doing anything else. As I listened, the music stopped mid-note. I froze, wondering what that meant. For a few minutes, it was dead quiet. Then I heard it. 2 pairs of unnaturally light footsteps. They walked in sync, slowly, as though they weren't in any kind of hurry. And they were walking towards the porch. Terrified tears rolled down my cheeks as I silently begged them not to come near me. The steps started walking onto the deck, and then the door to the back patio opened. My heart was in my mouth as I heard 2 sets of feet approach. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. Not with the blanket was ripped off of me. The female doll was standing right next to my head, holding the blanket in one hand as she stared at me. I was about to let out a scream when her hand dropped the blanket and clamped over my mouth. The other hand settled on my hair. She started rhythmically moving her hand through my hair, like she was petting me. Her eyes never left mine. 2 hands grabbed my bad foot. I shot a glance towards the foot of the couch and saw the male doll holding at my swollen limb, much like the female doll. He was staring right at me. He lifted his hand and snapped, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, the sun was out. Everything that had happened came back to me in a flash. and I looked down at my injured foot. Only it wasn't injured anymore. It looked like it had never been hurt. I got off the couch and stood on it to test it. It was perfectly fine. Agatha's text came back to me. They only want an audience, nothing more. Just follow the rules and you'll be safe. I guess part of keeping their audience meant keeping them healthy. Feeling physically better after a night of rest, I waited impatiently for Agatha to come back at 3 that day. When she finally walked through the door that afternoon, she had a resigned look on her face. She dropped her bag on the floor and gave a tired smile. I'll unpack, make us a pot of tea, and explain what I can. That was all the answer I got until she'd unpacked everything and put on her electric kettle. Only when we both had a steaming cup of chamomile in our hands did she start to explain. I don't know where they truly came from, she began, or even what they truly are. But when I turned 50, my health began to deteriorate. And with my wealth, I was a prime target for thieves or home intruders. Jeb's brother reached out to me shortly after my 50th birthday. He claimed that he had a way of making sure I was always healthy and protected. All I had to do was give them an audience. The day after I agreed, I woke up to find those two standing at my attention in my yard. All their seller told me was I must not remove them, and that I must always watch them dance at night. She took a sip from her tea. At first, I was as confused and petrified as you. But then when I came down with a dreadful flu bug a week after I got them, they came into my house in the middle of the night and cured me. Since then, I've realized that they are protectors, as long as you serve as their audience. That's why I almost never leave. Someone has to be here to make sure they have an audience, that they don't stop protecting the house and whoever stays here. Last week, my brother-in-law was killed in a car accident, and my sister was distraught. I had to go and stay with her to make sure she was all right. That's why I was willing to pay a complete stranger so much money just to watch the place. Our conversation went on for a little longer, but in the end, I more or less got it. I was still creeped out by the whole thing, but after the dolls had healed me, well, I wasn't as scared as before. Thus, I began Agatha's regular house sitter. It was a fair bargain. She finally got to travel and visit people she hadn't seen in years, while I got a steady, lucrative income in exchange for watching her place, and as a result, the dancing dolls, whenever she called me. I'd been her regular house sitter for about a year when Melanie called. Melanie was the kind of sibling you wish you didn't have to associate with. She'd been a little gremlin since the day she was born, and her behavior had gotten worse with age. It didn't matter how many times my parents put her in timeout or she got detention in school. No mistake she made was her fault. Anything anyone else got was something she had to have, and anything that didn't go her way was worth screaming herself hoarse over. When I got into college, she'd thrown fit after fit about not being able to go to college herself until they let her take an early admissions test. When she passed, I still think she bought the answers off of someone. She packed her bags and went straight to the enrollment office. She immediately made herself the bane of everyone on campus's existence. Anytime she wasn't in class was spent hooking up with frat boys or getting blackout drunk. She constantly skipped classes, mouthed off to teachers whenever she bothered to show up, and she wound up having to rent an apartment off campus when she yelled transphobic slurs at a trans man and got herself banned from the dorms. She was eventually expelled, and my parents refused to let her move back in with them until she learned how to act like an adult. She swore she'd show them by marrying rich. In the 3 years since she'd made that deal, she'd gone through 4 different boyfriends and 9 different jobs, most of them at fast food joints. Refusing to admit defeat, she'd started trying to mooch off any relative that didn't already hate her. So, it shouldn't have been surprising when she called me, talking in that sickly sweet way she always did when she wanted either money or a favor. and he totally left me for no reason and said I would never get a job at his dad's modeling studio. She whined, finishing a clearly falsified story and giving a few fake sniffles. So anyway, if you know any way I could get a job, sorry Melanie, I can't help you job hunt. I cut her off as I finished stuffing clothes and my plush turtle into my duffel. I have something really important to do this weekend. Liar, she screamed through the phone. Mom said you landed a cushy job working for a rich lady. I want in. I sighed. Mom didn't have a filter and always babbled to everyone about everything. It's not that simple. This really is a one-person job and... Great, so quit and I'll take it. What's the address? I hung up. Melanie only ever heard what she wanted to hear. Given how completely insane my sister had always been, I really should have predicted what happened next. Agatha's brother was getting hip replacement surgery, and since it was last minute, she was paying me $7,000 to watch her house for a whole week. Obviously, I said yes. The rules hadn't really changed, and by then I had them memorized. I thought I knew what to expect, other than keeping the fish fed and watching the dolls dance. My days watching Agatha's house were quiet. What I didn't expect was the knock on the door I got on the first evening of my latest week there. Agatha hardly ever got visitors that weren't from people she'd hired, so naturally, I was startled. I looked at the clock. It was 8:30. I thought I'd have enough time to shoo away whoever was at the door before the dolls came alive. Unfortunately, when I opened the door, preparing to see a Jehovah's Witness or perhaps a salesman, I found my sister. Hey, Tiffany, thanks again for the job. Melanie didn't let me say that I had not gotten her a job, simply strolling in with her baby pink suitcase and self-centered attitude. She began chattering about how she managed to manipulate Mom into telling her what city I lived in and the name of the woman I was working for. From there, she just stalked Agatha's name online until she found out where she lived. From there, she started talking about how excited she was to work for a fashion critic and how she was more than qualified to critique people's outfits. I finally found my voice, though I had to shout to make myself heard. Melanie, I did not find a job for you, and I'm definitely not giving up my job for you. You need to go. She froze. I hoped that I'd gotten through to her and glanced at the clock. 8:50. I had to work fast. Maybe I could promise to book her a hotel room and... You self-centered bitch. Excuse me? You know how badly I need a job? You knew I was perfect for the job from fashion critic, and you wouldn't give up your job for me. You selfish bitch. Melanie, you've lost it. Why don't you? Are you trying to get rid of me? You are, I can tell. Mom and Dad got rid of me. Grandma got rid of me when I sold her car. Uncle Jake got rid of me when I broke his microwave. My boyfriend left me. My bosses all hated me. Now even my own sister? Well, tough. You're not getting rid of me that easy. She grabbed one of the antique bottles on Agatha's shelves and smashed it against the wall, sending glass shards to the floor before she came at me with the broken bottle. My self-preservation instincts took over, and I ran for the first exit I saw, the back door. As I ran, the doll's unearthly music began. I paled. I was too late. What would happen now that I'd broken the rule? Come here, you family-betraying bitch. I forgot about the dolls as my sister came at me, screaming like a banshee. I tripped over one of the patio's footstools, landing flat on my back. She was on top of me in seconds, her eyes wide with madness as she tried to stab the broken bottle onto me. I pushed her back with all of my strength, my heart beating 1,000 miles a minute. She was stronger than me, stronger than I would have expected. She started pressing the bottle against me. Then Melanie saw something behind me and froze. What the? She was lifted off of me. My hands flew to my neck, gasping as I pressed against the cuts. I didn't have any trouble breathing, and to my relief, the cuts were only a flesh wound. Before I could get up, I felt someone's arms lifting me. I turned, but for once, I was relieved to see the female doll. Muffled screaming turned my attention to the male doll, who was holding my sister. The female doll continued to hold me as she watched her partner walk out of the patio, the struggling Melanie in his arms. From the front yard came the sound of the eerie music. With the female doll and myself as the audience, the male doll held Melanie in a bridal carry as he went to stand on a bare patch of grass. Then he began a slow single dance. It was a bit like a tap dance, only made more complicated due to carrying a struggling woman. As he spun her, though, Melanie seemed to enter a type of trance. He set her down and she stood, a dopey smile on her face. Their dance began something more akin to a waltz, with him leading her in one dizzying turn after another. When the music began to crescendo, he took her into his arms again. She stared at him with wonder, a big smile on her face. The female doll then turned, making sure I was facing the door into the house, and said to the male doll, "My sister." There was the sound of ripping seams, then a blood-curdling scream. Melanie's scream. Then, nothing. The female doll set me on the back patio's couch as the male doll came back. He was alone. The female doll put a hand on my throat, examining the cuts. Then she snapped, and I was out cold. The next morning, I turned on the news to find that the body of a woman who had been found in the woods nearly a mile away. Her broken-down car had been right next to her. Judging by the state of the corpse, the general consensus was that she'd been driving through the woods, decided to stop for whatever reason, and had been mauled to death by some sort of animal, with most people thinking it was a bear. I had a feeling I knew, but I wasn't about to say anything, seeing as how Melanie managed to tick off anyone who knew her for more than 30 seconds. No one was grieving especially hard. Agatha heard the news and called me. Apparently, that wasn't the first time the dolls had come to someone's rescue. "Just be glad they enjoy an audience," she told me. Her tone was grim. "If they ever find that you had no reason to miss a performance." A lump formed in my throat as I realized what she meant. Why am I saying all of this now? Agatha drafted her will yesterday. She has decided that she will leave her house to me to do with what I please. I've already decided to sell it. The money from such a sale would pay off the rest of my loans, and it's not like I need such a big house anyway. I finally managed to talk to Jeb, wondering if he could take the dolls when I sold the house. He said it was impossible. The house was now their home. It'll be a long while before Agatha passes, especially since she has a guaranteed way to recover if she's sick or injured. But when the time comes, be warned. If you happen to see a fancy mansion for sale and are told of a list of rules that must be followed, follow them. They won't like it if they lose their audience. Lima, India, Sierra. Written by Saturday. A lot of people wonder why I don't carry around a smartphone. It's a strange thing not to have. I still have a phone, it's just that it's a very basic model, and I only use it for calls or texts. I'm not even that old. Most figure I'm some kind of technophobe, but it's something different. My wife rolls her eyes every time she sees me making a call with it. She calls it my comfort brick. Meanwhile, she's checking out life hacks on TikTok. I've tried telling her about why I am this way a couple of times, but it's been hard to put into words. So, in an effort to collect my thoughts, I'd like to tell the world about what happened to me a couple of years ago, and, to an extent, what is happening still. I was working on my master's degree, but I was having a hard time finding something to write a paper about. I couldn't come up with a good subject, and time was running out. I managed to get a deadline extension, but only if I could present a suitable subject. I was about to give up when one of my professors suggested I talk to a man working in the private sector. He was a licensed physician who'd gone into private enterprise, but he was sure to have something interesting going on. I got in touch with him, and he asked me to come in the same day. Let's call him Solomon. Solomon and his team were working out of an honest-to-God laboratory. Most of their work revolved around medical hardware, so they had sterile white rooms to protect sensitive electronics. Solomon was about 6'6" and balder than a bowling ball. He towered over his workers and had a very soft demeanor. He would calmly shake my hand and nod as I presented myself. I got the impression that he was a kind man. You notice that sort of thing. As I explained my situation, he made a suggestion. I'm working on a project called LIS. I can't share all the production details, but we collect a lot of data related to sleep. I could share that data for your paper. That was amazing news. I could easily do a study with that kind of data to back me up. I was scheduled to help Solomon and his team to collect test subject for his LIS project. It was simple enough. People were supposed to take a supplement before they went to sleep and use a headband to record their experience. Didn't matter if they slept long, short, or barely anything at all. Data was data. This was bulk collection. They'd already gone through about 20 iterations of the project, so this would be the 21st generation. I wasn't allowed to take part in the earlier versions, but I was going to get full access to the Generation 21 bulk data. That would be more than enough to cover a master's study on a related subject. I put up some posters around campus, and it didn't take long for people to sign up. A lot of folks wanted to get their foot in the door of the private sector. Having Solomon's name on a CV could be more valuable than a quick payout, but they still got a symbolic sum as compensation for their trouble. As submissions started to roll in, Solomon brought something up. "Why don't you participate?" he said. "You could critique our methodology. We could separate your data if you think it would invalidate overall results, but I think it'd grant some valuable insight. You sure that'd be appropriate?" "Of course," he smiled. "You're already a part of this. Might as well get your hands dirty." I had a hard time saying no. I wanted to, but I couldn't. So, yeah, I signed up too. We ended up with 14 people in total. Some were medical students, others were dentists. There were even a couple of veterinarians. They were all invited in for a short presentation about the study and the various items they would be using. We were pressed into a cramped meeting room around an oval table with a projector showing an out-of-focus presentation on a sun-stained canvas. "Collection takes place over 2 weeks," Solomon explained, pointing to a calendar on the screen. "This allows us to account for irregularities. No worries if you miss a day or two, we've taken that into account." He showed us the items again. There was a headband that was used to record our sleep. It looked like something an 80s tennis player might use. There was a cable to charge it during the day. The other item was a small bottle of gel capsules. "This is a supplement to help us better record your experience. It does little to affect your sleep. We must insist that you take one about 10 minutes before you go to bed. 20 minutes if you had a big meal. Don't bite down on it, or your mouth will taste like a really crunchy salt. If you don't take it, don't bother with the headband. The data will be useless." It was a nondescript bottle, CMP5. It had a printed list of known side effects, but they were so generic that it might as well have been ibuprofen. There wasn't much more to it. We all got our kits, headed home, and that was that. I started working on my paper, charged the headband, and went on as usual. When it was time to go to bed, I did as instructed. I took a capsule, I put the headband on, and set my alarm. The headband was surprisingly comfortable. It even had a massage and heat setting. It had a thicker side, meaning you could turn it slightly and use it as a sleep mask. That suited me perfectly, so I'd wanted one for a long time. I figured I'd ask Solomon if I could keep it when the study was over, maybe in lieu of pay. The damn thing probably had Bluetooth speakers for white noise if I bothered to check. Going to sleep was surprisingly easy. I felt at peace. I had my alarm set and there was no disruption. No loud noises, no background hum, just the slight saltiness of the capsule on my tongue. What stayed with me all these years is what I dreamt on that first night. It was one of the clearest, most memorable dreams I have ever had. Not because it was amazing, but because it seemed so real. It was the first time I ever had a lucid dream, as in knowing I was sleeping. I dreamt I was at my old middle school, back in South Dakota. I walked down the hallway looking at all the pictures we'd put up. Most of the drawings just looked like mad scribbles, but every now and then you'd see something you recognized. A happy farmer, someone's dog, a sunflower, but the wrong color, mostly blue. It was all so real. The slate stone texture on the floor, the soundproof ceiling tiles that you could stick pens in if you flicked them hard enough, the wide hallways, allowing students to run up and down while leaving a lane for teachers down the middle. The welcome mat outside our homeroom, I remembered the font. I dreamt about some people I hadn't thought about in years. I could see my teacher at her desk, grading papers. There was a globe in the window, with plenty of grubby hand marks surrounding the continental US. Whenever someone went on a holiday trip, they were allowed to put a pin on the globe to show where they were going. I ran a hand across my old desk, feeling the notches bump against my nails. Then the speaker system crackled. I turned to see my teacher sit up straight. She looked at me and spoke in unison with the announcer. Lima, India, Sierra. I took a few steps closer. She kept eye contact with me. She was still grading papers with her right hand, turning the pages without looking away. Lima, India, Sierra. Someone walked past in the hallway. I could hear the chatter in the background of the PA system. Some of the pictures on the wall looked funny. One of the drawings had the number 21 on it. Lima, India, Sierra. She turned her attention back to the papers, and I could feel my blood run cold. Something was wrong. Something has irreversibly changed. I turn around and I see something, someone, and in a heartbeat, I woke up screaming. I threw the headband across the room, jumped out of bed, and I was wide awake. I'd only slept for 3 hours, but my heart was pounding out of my chest. I sprinted into the bathroom, washing my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror, only to see that I had been crying. My face was red and puffy. I had to sit on my bed for a while, holding the headband. I was shaking with adrenaline, waiting to find the peace to go back to sleep. It took me the better part of an hour. I didn't use the headband as a sleep mask after that. I just wore it as intended. I got a couple of more hours, but it was a dreamless sleep. I scheduled a call with Solomon the next morning. I was halfway through a cheese and ham sandwich when he called me. I still had a stubborn cowlick that wouldn't go away, making me look like something out of a cartoon on a video call. "First night," Solomon said. "How'd it go?" "I'm gonna be honest. Not so great." "Nightmares, huh?" I wasn't prepared for him to admit it so openly. Before I could say anything, he cut me off. It's not uncommon. In fact, it's very helpful. We have more data than we need of people just sleeping, but nightmares, we don't have a lot of that. They're much more valuable to us. "How did you know I had one?" "It's very common," he continued. "Some get nightmares, some get a sense of claustrophobia, others just don't use the headband at all and call it quits after a couple of nights. If this is what it feels like, I get it. It was awful. Do you want to quit the study?" I thought about it. I wanted to, but I couldn't afford to step off now. I had a paper to write, and I haven't gotten access to the data yet. Chances were, if I were to abandon the project, I'd be shit out of luck. I swallowed my fears and shook my head. "No, I'm okay," I said. "But I got a question. What's Lima, India, Sierra?" "That's just an activation phrase. LIS. It comes from the headband as a synchronization signal, sort of like when you snap a clapperboard on a movie set." "Is it dangerous?" Solomon chuckled a little. It's just information. The next night, I was hesitant about going to bed. I drank some milk, got ready, and spent a full hour scrolling on my phone. I was hoping to get so tired that I didn't care anymore, but it was difficult. I got the impression that if nightmares were valuable data, maybe Solomon induced them. Maybe that's what the pill did. When I finally went to sleep, I was so tired I couldn't keep my eyes open. And once again, I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. My high school gymnasium, completely empty. Every footstep echoed. Walls were decorated with images of important milestones. Then at some point, it started again. Not the PA system this time, but just this omnipresent voice, as if spoken by the walls themselves. Lima, India, Sierra. I remembered what happened last time I heard it. I spun around, looking for a solution. I was aware that I was in a dream, so I tried to think in terms of dream logic. Maybe I could hide? Lima, India, Sierra. I found this old speaker that was big enough for me to hide behind. I crawled in, closing my hiding space with a wooden panel. Lima, India, Sierra. Quiet. The tension lifts, and I can feel myself getting lighter. Something gently tugs at my wooden panel. I resist, but I don't have a good grip. It pulls back and I pull back. A moment of silence. The panel is ripped from my hands. I see 2 feet dangling in the air in front of me as something attacks. I fall out of bed, coughing and clutching my chest. I'm crying and I'm having trouble breathing from the snot covering my face. I am a wreck, and I've only just woken up. I got about 4 hours of sleep that night. This would go on for a couple of nights. I was a wreck, but I had studies to take care of. I still went to classes, I still worked on my paper, and I had a cheap cheese and ham sandwich in the cafeteria at lunch every day. This one time, as I sat down for lunch, I noticed I wasn't the only one yawning. Not that unusual, but I recognized a person across from me. It was one of the other people who'd signed up for the Solomon study. She was about my age, but in a different field. I could tell she was struggling too. People don't usually chug 2 Red Bulls for lunch. I got up and walked over to her. "You're in Solomon's study, right?" "Yeah." She put her half-drunk can of Red Bull up to her temple, cooling her head. "Mind if I join you?" "Knock yourself out." She introduced herself as Norma, Midwestern gal. Started her studies later in life than most of us. She had the appearance of someone who could probably cook one hell of a chili. "Trouble sleeping?" I asked, nodding to her energy drinks. "Yeah. How about you?" "Same." We sat there for a moment, exchanging a couple of pleasantries. I was doing my master's thesis. She was about to start an internship. "I hear this phrase," I said. "Whenever I hear it, I know it's about to get bad." She looks up, nodding enthusiastically. We say it at the same time. Lima, India, Sierra. Her eyes light up. "Yes," she exclaims. "That's it. I hear that one thing, and then he's just there." "Exactly," I say, then pause. "Wait, who's there?" "You know, that person thing with the seam." "What?" "It's like a person, but like a seam down the middle. Maybe it's just me." The following night, I try to look a little closer. I go into my dream with a mission: to gather information. Not only am I unusually aware of myself dreaming, but I also look closer at the environment. That time I was at the beach, a childhood memory. I could see my sister and mother swimming in the shallows. My father was there too, leaning back in a sun chair with a book. Then he turned to me, looking up over the pages. Without missing a beat, he turned a page and spoke aloud. "Lima, India, Sierra." and he repeated it over and over. And while the others played like I remembered, I was spinning around and looking for whatever Normal had been talking about. As I did, I noticed little details in the background. One of the billboards had changed text. Initial contact, 2 hours, 41 minutes, 18 seconds. After Dad repeated those same words for the third time, I felt a sense of calm. Then, terror. I spun around, looking every which way, only for something to change. I got a glimpse of someone pale, floating in midair. Someone humanoid, but the head looked a bit too bulbous. It didn't move its arms, just its vibrating chest. Then, I was awake. I didn't notice the transition until I gasped for air. I started having lunch with Normal regularly. We would share our experiences and discuss what we'd seen. For example, I shared the strange billboard text. She, on the other hand, had seen something similar. I dreamt about my high school graduation, she said, but my diploma looked like an email. An email? What did it say? I couldn't read it all before it got me, but there was an address. She handed me a slip of paper. I almost choked on my sandwich. It was Solomon's private email, the one I'd been handed by a professor when I first reached out to him. He didn't give this out to just anyone. I double-checked my phone and showed her it was the same. That doesn't make sense, she mumbled. How can anything from a dream be real? There were more dreams, and every time I would get little glimpses. I would be someplace familiar, and at some point, I would hear those damn words. It could be bird chirping in the window, a TV running in the background, a ringtone, an alarm clock, a passing car. There was always something. Lima, India, Sierra. Then, something would happen. Something would attack. I usually saw it just before I woke up. For example, its fingers were tightly webbed. They couldn't flex. Also, it wasn't just pale. It was a light touch of green, like dry grass. And in every way I saw it, its feet never touched the ground. I would wake up screaming, crying, or falling out of bed. One time I was already standing up before I knew I was awake. I would feel so bad about going to bed that I'd end up staying up way too late, just making things worse. I tried to tell myself that this whole thing was on a timer, and that by the end I'd have a security feature, but it was hard to keep appearances up. My lunches with Norma later extended to others in the same study. I guess Solomon hadn't counted on us all going to the same cafeteria. There was Elmer, Candace, Joseph, Pat, and Misha. Everyone had a similar experience. Elmer swore that the thing didn't have a face. Candace said it looked like it floated in the air, like a propped-up scarecrow. Joseph said it was bald, like Solomon. Pat said it never moved. It just appeared in midair. Misha, on the other hand, barely said anything at all. He hated just thinking about the damn thing. Norma was adamant about what she'd seen. The thing had a seam down the middle, but you could only see it when it got really close. Kinda like the spine of a leaf. And we all knew that just before waking up, it did something. Something sudden and dangerous. But we never remembered what. I think it was Candace who came up with the name, Floating Man. It was as good of a description as any. But more than that, it was strangely consistent. We could all see the same thing, no matter the environment. How could a single image resonate through several people at once? How can you share a dream? I remember us all sitting there, long after we'd finished our meals. No one knew what to say. What we'd experienced was unheard of. Even if one could induce a nightmare, it was unprecedented to have a single shared image, especially one that was so clear. I think it's the pills, I said. I don't think they're supplements. I think they're causing this. You think so? Norma asked. Solomon kind of hinted at it. He said having nightmares is valuable data. Everyone at the table groaned. It made sense. A bunch of underpaid students being used as guinea pigs. Could be some kind of mild Parkinson drug, Elmer suggested. Dopamine agonists? You really think they'd slip us something like that? Joseph asked. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Unless it was in the fine print, Candace added. Or it's something milder like SSRIs. We should try something, I suggested. What if, for just one night, we skip the pill? If we still get nightmares, it's the headband. If it's the pill, we can have it tested. It was an experiment. We liked experiments. We exchanged numbers and started a group chat to keep each other updated on our progress. It felt good going to bed that night. Either way, I was going to wake up the next day with some answers. I willfully picked up the bottle of capsules, rattled it, and wagged a finger. Not tonight. I put on some music, crawled into bed, and put the headband on. I checked in with the others. Some had already gone to bed. Others were still psyching themselves up. Norma was admittedly nervous. This whole thing would be a strange blip in the data for sure. But Solomon had already said he'd accounted for that. One day here and there wasn't all that bad. When I finally fell asleep that night, I felt confident. I didn't even realize I was asleep at first. It felt like closing my eyes and opening them again. But when I opened them, I was somewhere else. It was the shopping mall my mom and I used to go to when I was a kid. Most of the stores were still stocked with early 2000s fashion, and a handful of passerbys mirrored that. I could sense my mother on a bench, enjoying a soft serve. I walked around a little, feeling my confidence fade. Something was different this time. It was still one of those vivid dreams, but something felt wrong. A man in a stall turned his attention to me, looking across the hall. Lima. I sighed. It was gonna happen again, pill or not. It had to be the headband. I knew a comp sci guy. He could probably look into how the hell that thing works. I sat down, resigning myself to another scare. A woman walking out of a clothing store turned her head towards me while still walking the other way, speaking in a conversational tone. India. Looking around, I could sense something was off. There was other conversations happening. There was this young couple sitting at a juice bar, for example. They were having a conversation, but it didn't make any sense. They were lovingly looking into each other's eyes. As one said, induction stabilized, engagement in approximately 300 feet. The other kissed her hand and responded, suppressor offline, residual effectiveness 65%. Then they both turned to me, their faces slack. Sierra. I looked around. They returned to the conversation. One of them would say a number. Then the other would say a lower number. They would be counting down, but not like a clock. It took me a moment to realize they were talking about distance. 200 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet. Attention shoppers, a speaker crackled. All systems nominal. 40 feet, 30 feet. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. Why was this feeling different? I stepped out of the open, pressing my back up against a store window. They were still speaking, and the number was going down, but there was nothing for me to see. It had to be behind me. I turned around, but there was only a store mannequin, a blank, featureless face, slumped shoulders, and as I looked a little closer, it had a seam down the middle of its body. Something smacked into my chest. I felt a piercing pain as I was flung backward, knocking over the table the two lovers were using. They just stood back up, ignoring me completely. I touched my shoulder, only to feel real physical pain. There was blood on my hand. I wasn't waking up. The floating man had something moving in his chest as the seam closed. It pushed through the glass of the store window, moving through it without breaking it. I could hear a rhythmic pitter-patter as something solid touched the tiled floor. This thing wasn't just floating. It's more like it was being held up. and it was still coming for me. I ran up the escalator, passing an old woman as I went. She looked at me, shaking her head. Damage assessment, moderate. I didn't have time to think. Even then and there, my shoulder ached. I could feel the pain through my body. Looking back down, I could see the floating man coming closer, always a couple of inches off the ground, not flying across the room. I hurried past a hot dog stand. The text on the front made me pause. Lima, India, Sierra. I pushed the cart aside, hoping it would slow down whatever was coming my way. I passed a poster on the wall listing timestamps along with initials. It sort of looked like the way we structured bulk data. Was information from the study leaking into my nightmare? I hurried into the bathroom. There was another man there, washing his hands. I rushed into a stall, locked the door, and climbed up on the toilet. It took some effort to climb up, as it really felt like I'd been pierced through the shoulder. The nerve damage alone was enough to make my eyes water, and I had trouble staying quiet. I closed my eyes as hard as I could and bit my lip, hoping to distract myself from the pain. I didn't hear any doors open, just the pitter-patter of something taking careful steps. Then the man washing his hands stopped and spoke. Cortisol spike. Engagement in 3, 2, 1. A blank face passed straight through the stall door. I screamed as it pressed its chest against me. The floating man was so close that it could almost be a hug, making me look over its shoulder and past it. There was something behind it, something holding it up, like a puppet. The seam in its chest opened. I tried pushing it back, only to have my hand pierced by a bone-like protrusion. It went straight through the back of my hand, right below my left ring finger. It retracted and prodded again, lopping off the top of my middle finger entirely. It plopped against the floor tiles like I dropped a piece of sausage. I've never felt anything like that. Never. It wasn't just pain, it was a constant throbbing, nerve-searing pain. I braced against the back of the stall and kicked, pushing this thing out through the door. It gave me enough space to get out, turn a quick left, and run. I could feel it closing in as the pitter-patter followed. I got out of the bathroom, but I was bleeding profusely. It was only then that it hit me. I was lightheaded. How the hell can you be lightheaded in a dream? What happens when you fall asleep in a dream? What if you pass out? What if you die? I ran past the poster on the wall with timestamps. Some of the lines were crossed out. Making my way back into the main hall, I stood in the middle of the crowded mall, doing the only thing I could bring myself to. I screamed for help. I'm standing there, bleeding from my shoulder and hand, screaming for help, and all I see are these neutral faces turning my way. 190 BPM, adrenaline spiking. I kept screaming, but no one did anything, and from around the corner, I see the floating man. I close my eyes, scream, and tear at my face, begging myself to just wake up. For a brief moment, I managed to force my eyes open. I'm in my bed. I'm so sweaty that these sheets are sticking to me. I try to speak, but it just turns into a moan. My mouth is wide open and cotton-like, and I have no sense of control over my body. I'm not awake, but I'm not asleep. I flop my arm to the side, only to see blood on my hand. I try to force myself to move, to get out of bed, but nothing happens. I can hear myself snoring as my eyes start drifting downward. My eyes close and I'm back, but it's somewhere new. It's a traffic jam on the highway. A late afternoon, probably a memory. Someone is honking and we're miles from the closest exit. As soon as I can move, I get out of my car and go on foot. I pass by car after car. Then I stop. Something tickles my mind. I look a little closer at one of the cars, only to see Candace. She's leaning back in her seat. Something has torn through her chest, breaking her ribcage wide open. There's blood on the windshield. I try to convince myself that it's just a dream. I say it loud. I say it like a mantra, and as I do, her body slumps to the side, her eyes fixed on me. Lima. I shake my head. I run. I run as fast as I can. And despite it all being a dream, I can feel my thumping chest. Why is there still pain in my hands? Why is my shoulder still bleeding? I pass by a car with an open window. The driver fans themselves with the newspaper as a radio host speaks. India. I keep saying no, like there is someone there to listen. I put my hands over my ears, hoping it'll stop if I just don't hear it. I close my eyes as hard as I can, and when I open them, I see a license plate. Sierra. I dive under a car as someone breaks a window behind me. I'm almost crushed as an immense weight steps down on the car above me, but I manage to get out with just a sprained foot. I see the shadow of the floating man in the late afternoon sun. I pull on a door and get inside a random car, only for that blank face to pass straight through the passenger side window. Something grabs me by the chest and clothes and pulls me through the door like it was made of paper. A door is between me and the floating man, and something slams against it. I'm dropped on the asphalt like a wet towel. I try to get back on my feet, but I'm not fast enough. I pick the door up and wield it like a shield as something slams into it. Over and over again. I can see a sharp bone pierce through, just inches away from me. I push back as the door is ripped from me. I'm wide open and this thing is just a couple of feet away. I'm bleeding, limping, and wheezing for air. I step back, but I can tell I won't be fast enough. Not this time. The seam of its body opens all the way from the top of its head to the crotch. The floating man separates into two separate pieces as something reveals itself. There's a presence behind it, holding the two pieces up like a hand puppet. I can't tell what I'm really looking at. 6, maybe 8 legs. 2 halves of what looks like a human body from 2 front limbs. Mimicry to keep you looking where it wants to. And there's a head, a circular set of eyes, arranged in something resembling a mix of honeycomb and the seed pod of a flesh-like lotus. It's dripping as dozens of bones poke in and out of would-be eyes, and it descends on me, unfolded, primal, and angry. I wake up, but I'm not breathing. I've fallen out of bed, accidentally losing my headband. I'm on the floor, having knocked the air out of my lungs. I'm bleeding. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I try to get up, but I'm limping. How can my foot hurt from a dream? I still can't breathe. I count 20 seconds. I get to the bathroom and topple over the sink. It cracks and falls, sending me to the ground. A piece of ceramic bumps against my chest, and something dislodges from my throat. I spit out a piece of cartilage, bloody and raw. As I lay on the bathroom floor, I can hear my phone exploding with messages and missed calls. I knew it was bad. I knew it. But for a moment, I just drew in breath and thanked whatever God may be to finally, truly be awake. I couldn't speak, but I managed to call for help. Doctors would later explain that I had severe damage to my windpipe. I had several burst blood vessels, most of which were concentrated around my arm, stomach, and shoulder. They thought I'd fallen down a flight of stairs. They did not accept the explanation that it all happened in my sleep. It was impossible. The body can't do that to itself like that. When I got a chance to catch up with my messages and calls, I realized I wasn't the only one who'd gotten hurt. Norma was in surgery. Pat had a broken leg. Candace wasn't even answering. We would later find out she died in her sleep. They couldn't find any connection. The pills we took were just a mineral supplement. The headband was flashy lights, a speaker, some electrodes, and a memory card. Nothing malicious. I ended up staying in the hospital overnight. Before I left the next day, I had a surprising visitor. No one came to announce him, and no one prepared me. He walked right in. Solomon. I was still in bed, and he sat down next to me. He almost looked apologetic. "You all right?" he asked. I shook my head, pointing to my throat. "Ah," he said, nodding. "Sorry, we've been adamant about people taking the suppressor pill, but we had no idea LIS was effective enough to..." He paused himself, shook his head, and smiled. He looked excited. "I mean, you had some residual effects. you were technically still protected, and it still managed to do all this? Can I see? He stepped closer and I held up an arm, shielding myself. With my other hand, I buzzed for a nurse. Sorry, I'm just curious. This is a great development. We've got enough to get started on the next phase. I am more than thankful, and I want you to know that. Solomon got up, heading for the door before a nurse could get there. He looked back a final time. It really is just information, and information is so much cheaper than, say, a missile. Despite it all, Solomon was true to his word. I got a great recommendation, I finished my master's paper, and I could put my work on his project on my CV. I don't even know why, but mentioning I worked on the Liminal Intrusion System, or LIS, has opened all kinds of doors. Private sector, government, I could take my pick. Candace passed away in her sleep. Norma tried to look into it, but all signs pointed to a brain aneurysm. None of us who skipped out on the pill that night was spared. The study was called off. Not because it was deemed the cause, but because they got all the data they were looking for. I've come a long way in my career since then. Solomon is still active, and his team has come a long way since they had to use the headbands. I think they solved their visual transmission problems. Wouldn't surprise me if all they need is lights now. That's why I don't use a phone anymore. I know what they're capable of doing. I know that if I step too far out of line or say something I'm not supposed to, I could go to sleep one night and never wake up. And the worst thing is, I would know it's coming. I just need to hear those 3 words, and I know it's happening. Lima, India, Sierra. I went off trail in Eastern Europe and barely made it out alive. Something in the tall grass almost killed me in Romania. Written by Something Goes Here Too. Look, I know how this sounds. Another 20-something backpacker with a trust fund and daddy issues, right? Finding myself across 3 continents like some cliche from a gap year brochure, but hear me out. I'm Andrew, and yeah, I was trying to find myself, as corny as that sounds. Klamath born and raised, bro. Those mountains taught me everything about reading terrain, surviving in the backcountry, and respecting the wilderness. By the time I turned 25, I had already knocked out some serious treks. We're talking about the Andes in Peru, where the altitude will drop you if you're not careful, the Cameron Highlands in Malaysia during the monsoon season, 3 weeks solo in the Yukon Territory, where the grizzlies outnumber the people about 50-1. Hell, I even did a walkabout in the Australian outback with nothing but a water filter and some emergency rations. The point is, I wasn't some tourist with brand new gear and zero experience. I knew my stuff. Could set up camp in a whiteout, navigate by stars, identify edible plants, the whole deal. But the steeps of Eastern Europe? That was the only place I've ever been legitimately afraid I was going to die. Not hypothermia, not dehydration, not getting lost. Something inhuman. Something that made me understand why some places have warnings that go way deeper than stay on marked trails. This was about 10 years ago, when I was still stupid enough to think experience trumped local knowledge every single time. I was working my way across Eastern Europe, planning to hit all the major trail systems from the Carpathians down through the Balkans. Had this whole route mapped out on my GPS watch. Hostels booked, the works. Not exactly the most popular trekking route, but that's what appealed to me. Lesser known trails, you know? None of that overcrowded Alps BS where you're basically walking in a conga line of German tourists. I'd done my research, knew the area could be tricky navigation, since there aren't many landmarks, but I had good topo maps and solid GPS backup. The weather looked stable. I was carrying a week's worth of food, plenty of water purification tablets, standard cold weather gear, even though it was late spring. The locals weren't exactly enthusiastic about my plans. This old guy at the outdoor supply shop kept shaking his head when I showed him my route. Stay on trails. Stay near roads. he kept saying in broken English. Not go through tall grass alone. I figured it was the usual rural paranoia about outsiders, maybe some old Soviet-era superstitions about wandering around in restricted zones. Plus, my Romanian was garbage and his English wasn't much better, so I figured we were just having a communication breakdown. Should have listened. The border crossing from Moldova into Romania was more of a hassle than I'd expected. There's no real infrastructure for foot traffic at most of these crossings. They're designed for cars and trucks, not some American with a backpack trying to walk between countries. The Moldovan guards barely glanced at my passport, but the Romanian side was different. The officer looked maybe 25, probably bored out of his mind working this remote crossing. He flipped through my passport, asked me a bunch of questions in broken English about where I was going, how long I planned to stay, and whether I had accommodations booked. When I was explaining I was planning to hike overland down through the Balkans, his expression changed. He called over an older guard, and they had a rapid conversation in Romanian that I couldn't follow. Finally, the older guy looked at me and said, "You have guide?" "No guide. I'm experienced. I have maps, GPS." More Romanian between them. Then the younger officer held out his hand in that universal gesture that means one thing. I slipped him a 20-euro note, and suddenly my paperwork was in order. But as I was shouldering my pack to leave, the older guard grabbed my arm. His English was better than I'd expected. "You stay on marked trails only. Keep near farms. If you find tall grass, stay out. It's dangerous." Oddly mirroring the warning from the supply shop owner. I thanked him and assured him I'd be careful, but I could see in his eyes he didn't think I was taking it seriously enough. He was right. I should have asked him what kind of danger. Should have pressed for details instead of just nodding and walking away like I knew better. Instead, I crossed into Romania thinking I'd just gotten the standard tourist warning about wolves or wild boar. Maybe some concern about unexploded ordnance from old conflicts. I had no idea they were trying to save my life. The first 2 days went exactly as planned. Made good time, terrain was manageable, weather held up, the hostels were warm and friendly, but I was burning through more miles than expected on the established trails, and my GPS was showing this game trail that would cut about 15 miles off my route to the next resupply point. 15 miles is huge when you're carrying a full pack. Game trails are usually pretty reliable. Animals know the easiest paths better than any human trail designer, so I went off trail. The game trail was solid at first, well worn, maybe 2 feet wide, cutting straight through this endless sea of tall grass and scrubland. The steps out here weren't like anything I'd seen before. Not prairie grass like in the Midwest or the scrubland I was used to from California. This stuff grew in thick, irregular clumps. Some patches knee-high, others reaching almost to my chest. Dense enough that you couldn't see more than maybe 20 yards in any direction. My topo maps showed this whole area as intermittent farmland and low-lying scrub. But on the ground, it was just grass. Endless and tall, swallowing the horizon. It felt like the map was a lie, and I had wandered into some nature preserve or government land. Maybe a large industrial farm had gone fallow for years. What it felt like most was that I'd walked into the part of the country that wasn't supposed to be there, or walked back in time. The landscape was almost primordial. I'd been following the trail for about an hour when things started feeling off. Hard to explain exactly what I mean by that. You know how in the mountains you can feel weather changes in your bones before the barometer drops? This was similar but different somehow. Like the landscape itself was subtly off kilter. The wind patterns weren't making sense. I'd feel a breeze from the east, then a few steps later, it would shift completely, coming from the south, then die altogether. But the grass wasn't moving with it consistently. Some patches would sway normally. Others would stay perfectly still. even when I could feel the wind on my face. I stopped, did a full 360-degree scan like I'd been trained, listened hard. The usual step sounds were there, insects, some distant bird calls, that constant whisper of grass moving against itself. Nothing obviously threatening, but my gut was telling me something different. That's when I heard the thunder of hooves. A whole group of wild boar came crashing through the grass, maybe 30 yards to my left, running flat out like something was chasing them. Must have been 8 or 10 of them, including a massive sow that had to weigh 300 pounds easy. They were moving perpendicular to my trail and didn't even seem to notice me. My heart rate spiked for a second. Wild boar are no joke if they decide you're a threat, but they were clearly running from something. Not at me. Probably spooked by my scent and bolting for safer territory. I laughed at myself, took a drink of water, and kept walking. But that feeling of being watched never went away. And now, I was starting to notice other things. Patches of grass that seemed to move independently, flowing in patterns that didn't match the wind. Always just at the edge of my peripheral vision. Always stopping the moment I turned to look directly. Something was tracking me through the grass. Something that knew how to stay hidden. I had maybe 2 seconds between seeing the grass part and the thing hitting me. It came from directly ahead, staying so low to the ground that I barely caught the movement. Just this ripple in the grass, like a boulder rolling downhill. Except boulders don't move that fast, and they sure as hell don't have teeth. I did what I thought would work with aggressive wildlife. Threw my pack hard to the left, hoping to distract it, and drove right into the thickest patch of grass I could see. It was a gamble, but I figured anything was better than just standing there. The thing didn't even glance at my pack. I hit the ground and immediately tried to roll, get my feet back under me, but something clamped down on my left leg just above my ankle, like a steel trap covered in sandpaper. The pressure was incredible, like it was going to snap my tibia in half. Then it started dragging me. I'm telling you, I've been in situations before. Rock slides, flash floods, and even had a mountain lion stalk me for half a day in the Sierras. But getting dragged backwards through tall grass by something you can't even see clearly, that's a whole different kind of terror. My hands clawed at everything. Grass roots, rocks, anything to slow down the drag. The thing was hauling me like I weighed nothing, maybe 30 or 40 yards through this maze of vegetation. I could hear my jacket tearing, felt the ground scraping against my back and shoulders. My hiking pants were getting shredded against whatever was holding me. I tried to twist around to see what had me, maybe get a good kick in with my free leg. But every time I lifted my head, all I could make out was this shape that seemed to shift and blur, like it was made of the same grass and earth it was moving through. Then suddenly, it let go. I scrambled backwards on my hands and ass, putting distance between me and whatever was out there. Heart hammering so hard, I thought it might burst. My leg was on fire where it grabbed me, but everything still moved, which meant nothing was broken. The grass around me was completely still. No movement, no sound except my own ragged breathing. But I knew it was still there, watching me. I sat there in the grass for maybe 30 seconds, trying to get my breathing under control, when I noticed something was wrong with my leg. The bite marks were deeper than I'd thought. 4 puncture wounds, 2 on each side of my calf, like it had grabbed me with oversized fangs. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was how the skin around the wounds was already starting to change color. At first, I thought it was just blood pooling under the skin, normal bruising from the pressure. But bruises don't spread that fast, and they sure as hell don't turn that shade of greenish black. The discoloration was creeping outward from each puncture, maybe a half an inch in diameter already, and I could feel this weird tingling sensation moving up toward my knee. Venom. The thing had injected me with something. I've been bitten by rattlesnakes before, an occupational hazard when you spend enough time in the California backcountry. I know what venom feels like as it starts working through your system. This was different though. Rattlesnake venom burns. This felt cold, like ice water spreading through my veins. My hands were shaking as I rolled up my pant leg to get a better look. The puncture wounds weren't bleeding much, but the skin around them was starting to swell. When I pressed on the discolored area, I couldn't feel my finger. The numbness was spreading faster than the discoloration. I had to move. Now. Whatever this thing had pumped into me, I couldn't let it reach my core circulation. If it got to my heart or lungs before I found help, I was done. I pulled my belt off, wrapped it around my thigh as tight as I could, and buckled it. The pressure was immediate and brutal, but it would slow the venom spread, maybe buy me a few hours. My pack was still sitting where I'd thrown it, about 20 yards away. I could see the thing hadn't touched it, which meant it was either gone or waiting to see what I'd do next. I couldn't worry about that now. I needed my first aid kit, my GPS, and whatever water I had left. The nearest help was less than a few hours hike if I pushed hard. I just had to make it that far before my leg rotted off. I made it maybe half a mile before I had to stop relying on both legs. The hiking pole became a crutch, taking most of my weight while I dragged my left leg behind me. Every step sent jolts of pain up through my hip, but the alternative was worse. The weird thing was how quiet everything had gotten. No more rustling in the grass, no sense of being stalked. At first, I thought that was good news. Maybe the thing had given up, moved on to easier prey. Then I realized what was actually happening. It didn't need to hunt me anymore. The venom would do the work for it. All the thing had to do was follow at a distance and wait for the poison to drop me. Then it could feed at its leisure. The thought made me push harder, even though my leg was starting to look like something out of a medical textbook. The swelling had gotten so bad that I had to cut my pant leg open with my utility knife. The discoloration had spread past my knee, creeping up my thigh in these twisted, vein-like patterns that looked awful. I was following what looked like an animal trail, hoping it would lead to higher ground where I could get my bearings. When the grass opened up into this shallow depression, maybe 15 feet across, carved into the earth like a giant's footprint, that's when I saw them. Eggs. Dozens of them, clustered in the center of the depression like some kind of reptilian nursery. Each one was about the size of a football, with shells so thin they were almost transparent. I could see things moving inside, dark shapes that shifted and pulsed with their own rhythm. But what made my stomach drop wasn't the movement. It was the color changes. The things inside the eggs were cycling through different hues. Brown, green, gray, like they were practicing camouflage before they even hatched. I had stumbled into a breeding ground. The adult that had bitten me wasn't protecting territory. It was protecting its young. And if there were eggs that developed, there were probably other adults nearby. Maybe a whole family of these things, waiting in the grass around the nest. I backed away from the depression as quietly as I could, trying not to disturb anything, trying not to think about how many more of them might be out there. My leg felt like it was on fire now, the numbness replaced by this deep, throbbing ache that pulsed with my heartbeat. I had to get out of here. I had to get away from this nest and away from this entire area. However far these things claimed as their hunting ground, I needed to go beyond it before the venom finished whatever it was doing to me. I gripped my hiking pole tighter and started moving again, twice as fast as before, even though every step felt like my leg might snap in half. An hour later, I forced myself to stop. My body was shutting down whether I liked it or not. I found a patch of slightly higher ground where I could see maybe 50 yards in each direction and collapsed against my pack. The GPS said I still had 5 miles to the nearest buildings marked on the map. A farm, probably, maybe a small village. 5 miles normally wouldn't even register as a real hike, but with my leg the way it was, it might as well have been 100. I made myself eat half a protein bar and drink some water, even though my stomach was cramping up. Dehydration would kill me faster than the venom if I weren't careful. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, following basic wilderness survival protocols, while something actively trying to digest me from the inside out. This wasn't the first time I've been in serious trouble in the backcountry. I got bit by a diamondback in Joshua Tree about 6 years ago. Had to hike 4 miles back to the trailhead with my leg swollen up like a balloon. Spent 3 days in the hospital, but I made it out. There was that time in Colorado where I got my foot wedged under a boulder during a river crossing. Took me 2 hours to work myself free, and by then, hypothermia was setting in from the snowmelt. I was shaking so hard I could barely grip my gear, but I got myself to shelter and rode it out. The point is, I had been hurt before. I'd been scared before. I knew how to push through when everything in your body is telling you to quit. But this was different. Those other times, I knew what I was dealing with. Snakebite, hypothermia, dehydration. There are protocols for that stuff. Treatment options. This thing that had bitten me, I had no idea what its venom was designed to do, how fast it worked, what the end game looked like. I caught myself starting to roll up my pant leg to check the wound and stopped. I didn't want to know. Whatever was happening down there, looking at it wasn't going to help anything. All it would do was freak me out more, maybe make me panic when I needed to stay focused. 5 miles. That was the only number that mattered now. I shouldered my pack, adjusted my grip on the hiking pole, and started moving again. One step at a time, like always. Just like every other mountain I'd ever climbed, every trail I'd ever finished. The difference was, this time, the mountain was trying to kill me from the inside. I was maybe 2 miles closer to the farm when I saw it again. This time I had the advantage. I was coming up a slight rise, using my hiking pole to pull myself along, when something made me stop. Maybe it was the way the grass looked odd about 30 yards ahead, or maybe my subconscious picked up on movement that didn't match the wind patterns. Whatever it was, I dropped low and stayed perfectly still. At first, I couldn't make out anything unusual, just more of the same endless grass, swaying in the afternoon breeze. Then the breeze stopped, and one patch kept moving. The thing was massive, easily 12 feet long, maybe more, with the bulk of a saltwater crocodile, but completely different in every way. Instead of 4 legs, it had 6, 3 on each side, spaced evenly along its body like some kind of prehistoric centipede. But the weirdest part was watching its skin change. I'd seen chameleons do their color shifting thing before, but this was on a completely different level. The creature's hide rippled and flowed through different patterns. Brown earth tones, green grass colors, even the dappled shadows where sunlight filtered through the vegetation. It wasn't just changing color, it was changing texture too, mimicking the look of dried grass stalks and broken earth so perfectly that even knowing exactly where it was, I kept losing track of its outline. The head was pure nightmare fuel, flat and wide, kind of like a cobra, but proportioned for something 10 times bigger. When it turned slightly, I could see these yellow eyes scanning the area with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. This wasn't some dumb predator operating on instinct. This thing was thinking. 6 legs. I'd been hiking and camping for over a decade, studied wildlife biology in college, and spent time with rangers and naturalists all over the world. Nothing I'd ever heard of had 6 legs and looked like that. This was something completely unknown. Something that had been hiding out here for who knows how long. I had to get a picture. Nobody would believe this without proof. And if I didn't make it out, at least there would be evidence of what killed me. Moving as slowly as possible, I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket. No service, like I expected, but the camera still worked. I lined up the shot, zoomed in as much as I could, and held my breath. The shutter click seemed to echo across the entire steep. The creature's head snapped toward me instantly, those yellow eyes locking onto my position with terrifying precision. I pressed myself into the grass, trying to become part of the landscape, but I could hear it moving now. Not the heavy thrashing I'd expected, but this smooth, almost silent gliding sound as it flowed through the vegetation toward me. I closed my eyes and tried to stop breathing. My leg was throbbing in rhythm with my heartbeat, and I was sure the thing could smell the infection, the venom, whatever chemical markers I was throwing off as its poison did its work. The sounds stopped maybe 10 yards away. I could feel it there, waiting, testing the air. Seconds crawled by like hours. Then, finally, the gliding sound moved away, heading off toward the east. I waited another 5 minutes before I dared to lift my head. It was gone, but I knew it might circle back. These things were smart, patient. I had to move fast. I checked the photo on my phone. Blurry, but you can make out the basic shape, the weird proportions, the 6 legs. If I made it to that farm, this would change everything. Cryptozoologists would lose their minds. But first, I had to survive the next 2 miles with a leg that felt like it was dissolving from the inside out. The last half mile was pure hell. My vision kept swimming in and out of focus, and I was leaning so heavily on the hiking pole that my shoulder felt like it was going to dislocate. Every step sent waves of nausea through my system, but I could see buildings ahead, long, industrial structures that had to be some kind of agricultural operation. I stumbled through a gap in a wire fence and onto a dirt road. My legs gave out about 50 yards from the nearest building, and I hit the ground hard, my hiking pole clattering away across the gravel. Voices started shouting in Romanian, footsteps running toward me. I tried to sit up, tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out as gibberish. Through the haze, I could make out the word Agroin Industria painted across one of the buildings, but the rest of the company name kept shifting and blurring like it was underwater. Strong hands lifted me, and I heard someone curse when they saw my leg. One of the workers, a middle-aged guy in coveralls, was pointing at the wound and shouting, "Ambulanta, ambulanta," to someone with a radio. Another voice, older, gravelly, said something that included Blar de Araba. The word sent a chill through the other workers. They all started talking at once, their voices tight with what sounded like genuine fear. Grass dragon. Even through the venom haze, I understood that much. They knew about these things. They had a name for them. My breathing was getting more labored, each inhale feeling like I was trying to suck air through wet concrete. The world was tilting sideways, and I couldn't tell if I was lying down or standing up anymore. I rolled over, and my mind felt like it short-circuited. The steeps I had walked through were gone, just vanished. Where before there was an endless sea of grass, now it was what looked like miles of farmland. Surely this must have been just an effect of the venom. I felt my consciousness slipping away. The last thing I remember clearly was the interior of an ambulance, the rhythmic bump of tires on asphalt, and a paramedic working over my leg while speaking rapid-fire Romanian into a radio. The siren seemed to be coming from very far away, like I was underwater. Then, everything went black. I'm sitting in my study right now, looking at a printout of that photo. 10 years later, and it's still the only proof I have that any of this really happened. The image quality is terrible. You can barely make out the creature's outline through the grass, and the 6 legs just look like shadows and vegetation to most people. I've shown it to cryptozoologists, wildlife biologists, and even posted it on forums dedicated to unknown species. The response is always the same. obviously photoshopped or camera artifact, or my personal favorite, nice try, but we can spot a fake from a mile away. I don't blame them. If someone had shown me this picture before my trip to Romania, I would have said the same thing. I roll up my pant leg and look at what's left. My leg now ends slightly below the knee. The rest is a steel and plastic prosthetic. Sometimes, when the weather changes, my knee aches with a deep, bone-level pain that reminds me exactly how close I came to never making it home. The hospital records from Redacted are pretty sparse. I was there for 6 days. Apparently, I only remember fragments. IV drips, doctors speaking in rapid Romanian, someone asking me questions in broken English about what had bitten me. When I tried to explain about the creature, about the camouflage and the 6 legs, they just nodded politely and wrote something down that probably translated to, "Patient is delusional from venom exposure." The flight back to the States is mostly a blur too. I was still pretty messed up, running on whatever cocktail of antibiotics and anti-venom they had pumped into me. But I made it home, and after a few months of physical therapy, I was almost back to normal. Almost. I still hike, still travel, but I'm different now in ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't been where I've been. When locals tell me not to go somewhere, I listen. When my gut says something feels off about a trail or a campsite, I trust it. And when I'm in a remote country, I pay attention to sounds that don't belong and movements that feel off or don't match the wind. Because I learned something out there that no amount of wilderness expertise had taught me before. The world is bigger and stranger than any of us want to admit. There are things out there, creatures, that evolution forgot to tell us about. Ecosystems that operate by rules we haven't figured out yet. And sometimes, no matter how prepared you think you are, hubris can be just as deadly as anything with teeth and venom. And alright guys, that wraps up 2 hours of some horrifying Reddit stories. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you guys watching. And would you like to see more videos like this in the future? If so, make sure to comment down below and let me know. And also make sure to check out some other videos on the channel. And also make sure to follow my Instagram and follow me on Spotify. It really does help so much. And yeah, once again, thank you guys so much for watching. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're getting into some unnerving true Reddit threads, and oh boy, do I have some amazing Reddit threads for you guys today. They are interesting, they're weird, they're unnerving, and they're just going to be super entertaining and, like I said, interesting. So you want to stick around, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. I read every single comment, so please comment down below, and I might reply to it or heart it. But I really appreciate all the support. It means the world. And yeah, this video will be long enough already. So without further ado, let's get into some unnerving true Reddit threads. Neighbor is doing weird things that are threatening to me. Originally posted to r/legal advice, and the post reads as follows. A few weeks ago, a new neighbor moved in across the street. To my knowledge, it's one guy who's about 40 to 50 years old. For the past few weeks since he moved in, he has been taking walks around the neighborhood, and every once in a while when he passes my house, my living room has a window that can see into the front yard, he stands and watches me. When I go outside to investigate, he just says something to the tune of admiring my shingle work or stargazing. He has used these excuses before. He never comes directly onto my property when he does this. A few days ago, I came home, and when I went to pull the trash cans back from the street, my neighbor is sitting on his front porch with a rifle in his lap in plain view. I ask him if there is anything wrong, and he just nods at me. I went back into my house and called the police. Now, the spot I called the police from was in my kitchen. The only way to look into my kitchen from a window is if you walked up to my living room window and peered to the left. After hanging up the phone, I turned towards the living room and saw my neighbor about 2 feet away from my window, peering in with the rifle. I run into my room and lock the door. After the police arrived, I tell them what happened, and they told me that since he wasn't pointing the gun at me, that it wasn't a threat. The most they can do is trespass him, but by the time they arrived, he left his house. Yesterday, I came home at around 10 p.m. and found a dead fish in my mailbox. Without any evidence, how can I stop my neighbor from harassing me? Can I get a restraining order against him? And first off, before we move on to the comments, I just have to say it's insane the police said he wasn't threatening. I mean, because he wasn't pointing the gun at him. I mean, that's wild. Like, this guy is up against your living room window, peering into your house with a gun in his hand, and the police are like, yeah, he wasn't pointing at you. We can't do anything. Like, that isn't threatening enough? Someone walking up to your window, holding a gun, and wanting to do God knows what, and to add on to that, a dead fish in your mailbox, and the police are like, yeah, we can't do anything. That's wild to me. And now let's get into some of the comments on the post. Someone says, make a police report about the dead fish. Make the police take the report, even if you don't actually know for sure who put it there. You have your suspicions. Tell them. If they refuse to take a report, calmly escalate the matter to an officer with a higher standing and don't leave until a report is taken. Keep all of the police reports you make. And as everyone else has suggested, definitely get a good home security system, preferably with several cameras. Someone else says, I don't know shit about the law, but I'd say you should get a camera installed and probably keen any evidence of things put through your door. Then speak to a police/lawyer to see what your options are. And then the OP said, I'm fully prepared for any future aggression, but I am looking for a non-violent route first. I don't think I had any cause in any of my previous encounters to use force. And then the OP makes another post 8 days later titled, I believe my neighbor has been vandalizing my mailbox and shooting 22 caliber shots at my house. And so wow, that escalated, but let's get into the post. The OP says, so my previous post about this neighbor started here. Since then, I got cameras with night vision, motion detection alerts, window tint for my living room, and big, thick curtains. I also got a few of those stickers for my area of my house that says, insured by Glock, to deter any intruders. Now, the first night I got my cameras, I checked them the morning after to see how they worked. I made sure that there were no blind spots and all of them are fixed with no movement at all. When I checked the cameras the morning before, someone walked up to them wearing all black, including a mask, and pointed them down. When I left for work that morning, someone spray painted a knife on my mailbox. I filed a report with the postal inspector and called the police. The police said without any video evidence, there wasn't much I could do. That night, I woke up to a loud noise hitting my house every so often. I checked my cameras and couldn't see anything, so I went out and investigated and noticed small holes on my house. Looking around the ground, I see discharged rounds. I call the police again and confirm that it was 22 caliber shots from far away. I have a concrete home, so that would explain the lack of penetration. The police offered to have a car patrol the neighborhood and sit outside for 3 days, and nothing happens. I asked them if I could get a protective order from my neighbor who has a history of being hostile, and they said since I had no direct evidence implicating him, that I can't file it out of nowhere despite previous confrontations. I filed another report with a different officer and got the same spiel. I asked for them to take fingerprints of the bullets, and then they chuckled and put the bullets in a bag and left. 3 days ago, I heard shots again and checked the cameras and noticed they were facing my neighbor's house just where I put them, and I see a silhouette shooting from the middle of my street before stopping and running to the back of my neighbor's house. After that, I called the police in my room while watching the cameras. The police come and do a walk me through with the same BS as last time, even after I showed them the cameras. They knocked on my neighbor's door, and he claimed he heard and saw nothing. After they left, I asked him if he was telling the truth, and he looked at me and smiled. It was very unnerving. I don't know what to do at this point. And now let's get into some of the comments. Someone says, OP, a suggestion for you might be to purchase a trail camera, essentially an outdoor camera that runs on batteries and records to a memory card, and try to place it somewhere non-obvious on the outskirts/edge of your property. A few other thoughts. Go to your local county courthouse and actually inquire there to what the requirements are for a restraining and or no contact order. The police may not be the best persons to ask about if your neighbor qualifies for one. Contact your local chief of police and let them know your property has been vandalized and shot at. Ask if there's anything else that can be done. And I mean, I can't imagine being in the OP's shoes here. They must feel so helpless calling the police, and the police each time are just like, yeah, sorry. Even though you have literally been shot at, have evidence that you've been shot at, and we can't do anything. I mean, I just can't imagine how helpless I would feel if the police just keep telling me, hey, there's nothing you can do, but it just keeps escalating with the neighbor. And then the OP makes an update 3 months later. And weird enough, he never made a post about it, but he posted about it in the comment section of a post, so let's just read it. He says, this similar behavior is something I suffered over the course of 1 to 2 months in Florida. I made posts in LA asking for help and got reasonably good answers. Unfortunately, my neighbor pushed it too far and tried to break in my house in the middle of the night after a series of weird escalating behavior. As a result, I shot him multiple times. I was questioned and interviewed over 7 hours and then released due to Florida's stand your ground laws. Turned out the neighbor was mentally ill and the family is currently trying to sue me for wrongful death. I hope this goes better for the LAOP than me. I should have just moved. And I mean, what a chilling final update. I mean, the OP never gave us such an extensive update. I mean, it's understandable why. I don't think anybody would ever want to write out the events of them killing somebody, if that makes sense, like in detail. And so it makes sense why we never got such a written out and long update compared to the first ones, because I mean, if I were the guy, I wouldn't want to, write out me shooting someone and the events that transpired. But just so sad that even had to happen. I mean, the OP took all the right steps. He called the police. He got cameras. He called the police on every single instance. He told the police who he thought it was, etc. And the police still did nothing. And he ended up having to shoot and kill his neighbor. Even though he said, hey, I don't think my neighbor is very mentally sound. He's going a little bit off the wire. But the police said, hey, we can't do anything. I mean, the OP literally saw his neighbor standing in front of his window with a gun. Like, how much more of a terrifying image can you conjure up inside your head than that? Like, that gives me goosebumps even just thinking about. And the police are just like, hey, he wasn't pointing at you, so we can't do anything. And then this guy ends up shooting the OP's house, spray painting a knife on his mailbox. He put a dead fish in his mailbox, etc. And the OP ended up having to shoot the man and kill him. And it's so unfortunate that he will have to live with that for the rest of his life, even though he took all the right steps. The only thing he didn't do was move, and that's not easy to just move on a whim, so it's understandable, but it's just so unfortunate that this situation even had to happen. But like, seriously, this is such a terrifying scenario. I mean, like, the OP must have just felt so helpless going through his life every single night, wondering if someone's going to break in, and eventually the guy did, and the OP had to shoot and kill him. But yeah, this is seriously such a unnerving and terrifying Reddit thread, because it ended up in someone actually dying and the OP almost, getting injured himself. Like, who knows what would have happened if that guy or his neighbor got into the house? Was the neighbor trying to kill the OP? Was he trying to rob him? Was he trying to do whatever? Like, just such a scary scenario, but hopefully the OP is doing better now. But just wow. On to the next one. Am I the asshole for hating my wife's creepy hobby project? And the post reads as follows. Okay, this sounds insane, but I swear my wife is totally normal otherwise, which makes this so strange to me. For context, we're both in our later 30s and live in a pretty typical suburban neighborhood where we all know each other. My wife has always loved trashy movies and shows about infidelities, and she eats up true crime about spouses killing their cheating partners too. She just says something about it makes her morbidly fascinated, in her words. Well, a couple months back, we had a scandal in our neighborhood where a married couple in the neighborhood divorced because the husband cheated. No, there wasn't a murder or anything like that, but she became obsessed with learning every detail from every neighbor. No matter the occasion, be it a baby shower or cookout, she would bring it up hoping there would be any new information. A month later, when I stumbled on the board in her home office, I was doing some cleaning and I found a massive bulletin board facing away, leaning up against the wall. Curiosity got the better of me and I turned it around to find a literal fucking conspiracy board of all our neighbors' pictures with lines of yarn connecting each other like the fucking Pepe Sylvia meme. I was totally confused and asked what this was, and she told me it was a hobby she had started recently where she would track rumors or likely candidates for cheating on the board. The yarn represented who was possibly cheating with whom. She had clearly gotten all the images on Facebook or some social media and printed them out and even had a few sticky notes with details. I told her this was creepy and insane, and she said maybe if I was doing it as a man, but she is just having harmless fun as a hobby and she wouldn't be crazy and try to oust anyone based on rumors. She just feels like a detective. She told me to view it like a creative art piece. I was still super weirded out, but I let it go. I thought about it a lot. Well, every now and then I admit to checking the board when cleaning, but just a couple of days ago, I looked to see that now I was on the board with a yarn attached to a neighbor's wife I'm casual friends with. I asked her why she would add me if she thought I was cheating, and she said that it was a different yarn color for potential matches for cheating. She said if it makes me feel better, she was planning on adding herself to the board soon. Well, I got pissed and kind of lost my temper about it. I told her to get rid of the board or our marriage will be in trouble. Things have been super rocky since. Sorry for the long post. I am starting to feel bad and it hit me more than usual this morning. Should I apologize to her? And before you ask, no, I don't suspect her of cheating. Honestly, I wish she was because it would at least make more sense than this. And now let's get into the comments. Someone says, I really couldn't see it getting weirder until she mentioned adding herself to the board. This is a strange game your wife's playing, and it seems like an unhealthy obsession with infidelity. Someone else says, obsession is not healthy and isn't a hobby. She's borderline stalking people because of some weird obsession with the concept of infidelity. She needs therapy. I wouldn't have stayed for a second if my husband did this creepy shit. Someone else says, I am a big fan of true crime myself and can be nosy about neighborhood gossip, but I would use my yarn to crochet stuff while I watch or listen to true crime YouTube channels. It's absolutely creepy for her to print out pictures of your neighbors and then speculating about you and another neighbor. You don't have to be okay with whatever your spouse does. I would have done the same thing if I was in your shoes. So it seems like everybody is on the same page and says this is really weird. And now the OP gives us an update. Let's get into it. Anyway, Jesus Christ. Firstly, appreciate all the concern and NTAs. It gave me the courage to approach her and tell her that while I may have overreacted by threatening our marriage, I think it is a creepy thing to do. She apologized and said she would get rid of the board. I thought we were good. Literally, 2 days later, shit hits the fan. Our happily married next door neighbor finds a woman's bra under the bed that does not belong to her. It doesn't take long for the whole neighborhood to find out. Well, my wife is giddy, like jumping up and down for joy. She shows me the board, which she still didn't trash like she promised, and of course, the husband was marked with yarn, meaning he was likely to cheat. She told me the board was accurate after all, and maybe she should keep her hobby around. I was definitely suspicious, so I looked at the board again later. It looked different from the last time I saw it before the latest scandal. Instead of the yarn connecting to another neighbor, the cheating husband's yarn connected to a post-it with a question mark. Firstly, it was the only question mark there, and I swore it wasn't there the last time I saw the board. So either she changed it after the cheating to prove a point, or slightly before it happened, which made me even more suspicious either way. Now I felt like I was the detective and I was going crazy. I went over to the cheating husbands to ask a few questions. The wife was staying at her parents', so it was just the two of us. I asked him if he actually did it, and he said no, he would never. Then I asked if my wife had been over recently. He said one day, while you were at work, his wife asked her to water a plant they had while they were both away and told her where the key was. So yes, I immediately raised an eyebrow. I asked if he still had the bra, and he was getting nervous and told me not to get the wrong idea. I said don't worry. He still had the bra, and I looked at it. It was my wife's, but one I knew she almost never wore because it was from a lingerie set I bought her one Christmas, and she said it was uncomfortable. I told my neighbor I needed to talk to my wife and ran out, but I told him not to worry. I approached her with the bra and asked her what was going on. She played stupid, but I told her to cut the BS. I asked if she had either cheated on me with him or planted it there. Either way, she was in trouble. She confessed to planting the bra and said it was to make me admit her hobby was valid or something. Holy shit, this woman's crazy. I flipped on her. I said this was worse than her cheating on me because instead of ruining just our marriage, she ruined our neighbors and ours. I demanded she call the wife and admit to everything, even sending pictures of the board. Oh my God, this is insane. I even showed the Reddit post, which actually helped convince her my wife had planted it rather than cheated on her husband. Well, they made up, but now I have no idea what to do. I am barely speaking to my wife, and it is only a matter of time before the entire neighborhood figures this out. I seriously need advice. Holy shit. That is one of the biggest turns I was not seeing that at all. I thought that maybe the wife was, or the bra was going to be mistaken for something, and they didn't end up cheating, or even if they did. But I was not expecting for the OP's wife to plant a lingerie or a piece of lingerie under the pillow to sabotage their marriage, to prove her hobby is correct. Like, seriously, that is so utterly ridiculous. I don't even know what the OP should do at this point. I mean, to be honest, like, yeah, like, what do you even do after that? You're just like, holy shit, my wife is crazy. And the OP gives us an update a few months later, and I was not expecting this. And it takes a lot of fun out of the previous post we just read. I mean, I was a little bit giddy and amped up because I was just like, that's insane and that's wild. I was never expecting that. But yeah, this next post is equally as wild. Let's get into it. It's been months since the last update. I'm sorry, I've been busy. Long story short, my wife is in a mental health facility. After what happened previously, I did not speak to my wife for a while. I tried to stay working or out of the house as often as I could. Well, a few weeks passed and time made it seem like less and less of a big deal. Finally, my wife offered to take me out for a very nice dinner and make things up to me. She told me everything was behind her, and while I was avoiding her, she had actually started online therapy to get help and realized now what she did was wrong. I really believed her, and we had a great night. One thing led to another, and yeah, LOL. It took about 2 days after that for her to get a pregnancy test, and she texted me the positive result. Yeah, I know some of you already think I'm a fucking moron, but it had been a rough year, and this made me really happy. I started getting very excited. We started talking about turning my home office to a baby room, looking up ways to prepare, booking appointments, planning a shower, etc. A really fun but whirlwind weekend. Unfortunately, she told me the first ultrasound was at a time I had to be at work, and she would have to go alone. Really bummed me out, and I asked her to reschedule, but she said it was the only availability. Well, that next week she went, and I waiting for an update or pictures or anything. Nothing. She came home and was super quiet, and I flipped out and got super worried that the worst had happened. I told her I understood she was probably in a lot of pain about something, but she had to tell me. She finally admitted no, it wasn't a miscarriage, but she was actually pregnant for longer than she thought. Longer than the last time we did it. She actually got pregnant during the time I was avoiding her. Obviously, I was so mad and upset, and I couldn't understand why she would do this to me. But then I realized all the signs were there for so long, and all the comments telling me she was probably cheating was right. But I tried to keep a clear head for at least a second because I really love my wife, and I couldn't believe it. I asked her who it could have been, and she actually said she didn't know. She said she hadn't done it with anyone during the time I was avoiding her. She swore it and also didn't know what this meant. I thought about it and realized if she was really pregnant for that long, her tummy should be showing, and it wasn't. I decided to call the place and ask them to confirm what they said. My wife told me it would be a waste of time, and she promised she heard them clearly, so I didn't do it that night. But I couldn't sleep that night without hearing it from the doctors myself. I called the clinic she told me she went to that day before in the morning and asked them to confirm the results. They told me something worse than I expected. She had no visit. She was never there. I didn't understand that at all. Before I talked to my wife again, I did what I should have done in the first place and reverse image searched the pregnancy test image. Yeah, it was on Google from a random years old Facebook post. I was actually really mad at my wife and could not believe she would put me through all this. I confronted her about the pictures and that I called the place and there was no appointment. I told her she had a pattern of lying and this was probably the end of our relationship. But she responded in a way I didn't expect. She burst into tears and went manic, which I did expect, but then said that she had cheated on me and really was pregnant and that I made this up in my head because I couldn't face what she did to me. She said she felt like the devil and the mustache man from World War II and started sobbing and literally screaming at the top of her lungs. She locked herself in the bathroom and told me she was going to commit S-word over what she did to me. I couldn't get the door open and freaked out. I called the cops and they broke the door down. She was not hurt, but she was really out of it. They took her to get a mental evaluation and she told them everything there. She even started mixing in stuff about the board and how she knew everyone around her was a cheater, so she had done the same because she was in an evil place. She promised them all she was pregnant, but she didn't know who the father was. They tested her while in custody and no pregnancy at all. They told me she was likely suffering from a form of schizophrenia and actually genuinely believed what she was saying and likely always had to some level, but it seemed to be getting worse. They said she had a symptom called self-accusation and needed help. Well, I got her in a facility last week and she is safe. They are making a little progress. I do not think she thinks she is pregnant anymore. I have visited a few times, but she is very withdrawn with me and says she feels too guilty to look me in the eye. I think there was definitely meddling at certain parts like planting evidence, but now I just feel terrible. I did not get her the help she needed when all the real signs were there. I hope her medication starts to help and she can be normal again. And yeah, the neighborhood gossip is having a field day with all of this. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope this is my last update. Thanks for all the help. And that was indeed not the OP's last update. And the OP gives us an update a few months later titled, "My wife is dead because of this subreddit, and I'm lost." He starts the post by saying, "None of you will probably remember me. I feel stupid for even linking the post, but here was the last update I did. My wife spent a few months in a mental facility. I visited her every day and went along with her like the doctor said to. She would say she was pregnant and I would agree. She named the baby Belaine, so I would say, 'Hi, honey. Hi, Belaine,' every day I went. They prescribed her Cobethny, and over time, things got better. She was acting like her old self again, and forgot about Belaine too. 2 months ago, she was released and the neighbors threw her a little welcome back party, and no hard feelings, obviously, since what happened. Well, A few weeks after she got home, she was talking about how she wanted to move on from all of this and asked me to promise not to talk to anyone about what happened to her. And I said, yeah, but then I remembered that I had posted that update and I started to feel really guilty about it. I asked ChatGPT what I should do since I was lost, and the ChatGPT said to come clean and show her the post and it'd be fine and explain. I kept everything anonymous. Well, I did that and she got really mad and freaked out and was really hurt and said I should have uploaded a selfie of her too at that point because of all the detail I shared. She didn't talk to me that night, and I asked ChatGPT what to do, and it said write a letter. So I had him write a letter to her saying sorry, and I printed it and put it on the kitchen table before I went out to get groceries one morning. First off, this is pretty eerie that this guy's talking to ChatGPT for advice and referring to ChatGPT as he. That is very, very eerie and unsettling, but let's continue. When I came back, it was all torn up and she was gone. She texted me that I was a huge asshole and she had left somewhere she wouldn't tell me. I saw her weekly pill container thing and saw she hadn't taken the dose for that day and yesterday, so obviously I was really worried and went out to find her with the pills. I looked around the entire neighborhood and she still wasn't there. I went home really worried and called her and she didn't pick up any time. I asked ChatGPT, oh boy, yeah, I know I use it a lot. It has been very helpful usually, what to do, and it said to relax, and if she doesn't want to talk, give her space. Oh man, why is this guy asking ChatGPT for life advice? Okay, and then he says, well, I did that for days. I didn't hear anything from her and I stopped checking. I was sick to my stomach every day, but waited and waited for her to get back to me. The first night, I decided I should delete her location from my phone to give her privacy too, but then I regretted that, but I couldn't add her back without sending a request, so that was a bust. Well, you already saw the title. Some driver had hit her crossing the road a mile off from our neighborhood a few days after she left at night, and she was dead. The cops came to my door and told me. They said the guy wasn't drunk, and he said she was basically laying down on the road and he couldn't see her at all. Obviously, I pressed charges because he fucking killed her, but I don't just blame him. I also feel like it's my fault for showing her the post and making her leave, but also I feel like it's your fucking fault for this too, and this whole subreddit is to blame. I'm really mad at everything. I barely eat or sleep in the past few weeks, and I don't know what to do. Since you all got me here, I thought I would ask what to do, and don't say therapy, I know that. I go sometimes when I remember, and no, it's not ChatGPT, it's a real person on BetterHelp. Man, that was shocking. This spiraled so fast, and it is so scary to see this guy using ChatGPT as his advice. He's not reaching out to a friend, he's not reaching out to his neighbors, because from what I've read, his neighbors seem very neighborly, if that makes sense. Like, they seem like they want to help each other out. They know each other well. Why wouldn't he go to talk to one of his neighbors for some advice? Obviously, he doesn't want to give away all the information, but that's better than ChatGPT. But Jesus Christ, she's dead. Wow. Let's get into some comments. Listen, I won't say YTA or NTA. You need serious psychiatric support. This is one of the most painful burdens anyone can feel. And listen too, while you made mistakes, we all do. You did not kill your wife. Don't carry that around in your heart. Seek faith, seek counseling, seek kindness. Resolve to become a better person. Maybe look for the hand of God. But above all, do not keep asking Reddit or ChatGPT for help. You need professional support. Please get it now. And I completely agree. And for everyone watching, if you're ever going through something, don't rely on Reddit or ChatGPT for help. That's not the right place to go for help. Please go to a parent, a friend, a school counselor, a counselor, a therapist, yeah, the police if it's a necessary situation. But wow, that is so depressing. How he just kept talking to ChatGPT the days, and the ChatGPT kept telling him to wait, and your wife needs distance. And his wife ended up getting hit by a car. Wow. That is truly so disturbing. Someone else comments saying, sweetheart, I think you need to get rid of ChatGPT. It's generative AI and should not be used like a freaking magic 8-ball. I'm sorry to hear about your wife. Sounds like you and her were between a rock and a hard place. My dark humor wants to make some really inappropriate jokes, but that is just a coping mechanism as well. Grief is hard, but it does get easier with time. Someone else says, you're using AI to dictate your decisions. This is just insane to do in a relationship. I'm sorry for your loss. Someone else says, I think ChatGPT killed your wife. Someone else comments saying, I'm sorry for your loss, but it's not your fault, the driver's fault, nor is the fault of anyone on Reddit. She had serious mental health issues and was off of her meds. Sadly, her own actions caused her death. Someone else says, okay, OP, I went back and read the other posts. You are not an asshole. You were just married to an incredibly mentally ill and psychotic person who, unfortunately, could not control herself. Please take time to love yourself. This whole situation was not your fault. Someone else says, using ChatGPT is insane. You really need psychiatric help. This was probably all a butterfly effect from it all, and it's disheartening. But it isn't Reddit's fault either. You asked a generative AI device, and it told you to show the subreddit. You did, and the consequences ensued. And I don't even have words for this one. This is just the most insane Reddit thread I have ever gone into. And it's so depressing because, you know, it started off with like, it was kind of playful, obviously. Like we read the first post. My wife has this weird hobby project. It's a little bit concerning, but, you know, it's whatever. And then she plants the bra, and then it ends up happening that she has schizophrenia. And then she keeps lying, and then she keeps lying, and then she gets the help, and then she thinks she has a baby. And then that final post is so eerie because her death was so preventable if he didn't ask ChatGPT for help. Like, oh my God, that is like the most dystopian thing ever. A man asking a AI computer on what to do, and the computer told him to just keep your distance. But if he would have talked to any person, any real person, they would have been like, hey, your wife's missing. She's mentally ill without her medication. She has schizophrenia without her medication. Go find her or call the police to find her. Oh my God, man. This is seriously so depressing because her death was so preventable. Like I said, if he would have talked to any real person, they would have told him to go find her. She has schizophrenia, she's off her meds, and she needs help. But instead he talked to ChatGPT, and she's dead. I hope the OP is doing better now, but I think he needs a lot of help as well to move through this and get his life back on track, and hopefully he can. Just such a depressing thread. And just, wow, I have no words. There's something going on in my house that has me a bit stumped. Originally posted to r/RBI, and the post reads as follows. I don't know if this problem is an RBI problem, so if this fits somewhere else that you know of, please tell me. For the past couple of days, I've had this issue. I'm pretty sure someone is in my house, but I can't exactly prove how. And yes, I called the police this morning. They don't seem to know either, but I'll get to that in the next couple of paragraphs. I'm 24 female, if that'll help in explaining my predicament. I live alone. I keep a tidy house, more so than most people. My bedroom can be a bit disorganized at times, but the rest of my house is well organized, which is why I was able to detect something was off. I came home from work a couple of nights ago and found a bottle of scotch sitting on my stove. It was my scotch. That's not the mystery. I use it for cooking. It sits near the stove, never on it, and I don't remember the last time I had hands on it. I was able to convince myself that I had maybe moved it while cleaning the counter and subconsciously put it there and hadn't realized it. I'm still not even against believing that, but I'm making a point. The second thing I noticed, which I know wasn't a fluke on my part, was an energy drink sitting in my fridge. I like to drink the grape NOS energy, but I like to drink them warm, and I'll leave them out for an hour or two to let them warm up. I never put them in the fridge. But while I was running errands, I get back and find this thing sitting in my fridge, which I just wouldn't do. It was the very early morning hours, about 2 a.m. give or take, and I can hear footsteps inside of my house. They weren't on that floor though. More specifically, they were on the ceiling. I have a metal roof, and the sound of something hitting that is very different from the sounds I was hearing. These definitely sounded like they were coming from the attic. Also, I don't have an attic. I called the police. They were not very much help. Wasn't much they could really do. They looked around my house for entries. Nothing seemed to really stick out. I did this myself, but I felt a second set of eyes could hopefully point me to something that I didn't see. But as I stated, they weren't much help. Not trying to take jabs at the police, but it is what it is. I worked the day shift today. When I got back home, I found a few of my ceiling tiles on the ground. This was alarming. It was like someone had stepped through my ceiling. I have no clue what to do. I had my neighbor from next door come over to help me find a place someone could have gotten in. My windows are always locked. There's one place on the outside of the house that is theoretically able to be accessed and entered through, but it would require a ladder and a screwdriver to get through. And I just don't see how someone could access that without raising alarms from the neighbors. Any and all advice and recommendations are welcome. And because I know people will suggest this, cameras are already ordered. And then the OP makes a quick update saying, "Thank you for everyone responding. I feel the need to clear a couple of things up that seem to be confusing people. First, I was in a jumpy state of mind when I initially wrote this, and I'm realizing that I wasn't clear in explaining some things. I've addressed it in many of the comments, but I'll address it here to hopefully be more informative. The "I don't have an attic" comment was a poor choice of words. I mean that there doesn't appear to be any way up there that anyone has been able to find from within the house. There's obviously a way up there, albeit a challenging one. There's definitely space for movement on the upper portion of the house. Second, the NOS. I completely take responsibility for this one. I did absolutely zero to clarify what I meant. The flavor of NOS that I like isn't sold commercially in packs from the grocery store. I have to buy them cold from the cooler at the gas station and then let them sit out to warm up. I understand that my initial explanation was a bit confusing, and I'm sorry about that. Also, I called my older brother and asked if he could come over and check out my place with me just so I can have an unbiased set of eyes on the property to see if a conclusion can be reached. People expressed concern that I was staying in the house, and I very much appreciate not only these users, but everyone who offered advice. I'll be staying with my brother and sister-in-law until the matter is resolved. And now let's get into the comments and see what the commenters think. Someone says, "Sharing the story since you mentioned you rent. A friend of mine from years ago kept feeling like something was going on with her food. Things like being sure she hadn't opened something yet and finding it open, cases of soda seemingly to move on their own, and food being nearly gone when she thought she still had a serving left. Turned out one of the maintenance workers her landlord hired was letting himself in and having snacks in during her workday." And then the OP responds saying, "I recall a Reddit story from a few years ago where a mother and a daughter were being stalked and the house was being accessed when they weren't home. It was very voyeur type behavior where their bras and underwear were being gone through and tablets were attempted to be accessed. It turned out to be the teenage son of one of their maintenance workers who made a copy of his dad's keys or something along those lines. I don't have such services at my house, but your comment does raise a very valid point about safety and accountability. Thank you so much. And then someone else comments saying, number 1, do you have cameras in your house? If not, get some. If you feel weird about filming when you're at home, only time them on when you're gone. Number 2, do you have cameras outside of your house? If not, get some. Number 3, do you have motion sensors in the house? Number 4, old school trick / spycraft. A, photograph your house as you leave so you can compare when you get back to see if anything's different. If so, photograph again to document the difference. B, tape a hair or other such filament to your front door across the gap to see if it has been disturbed when you get back. You could also do this with the fridge door. C, you could sprinkle flour or something on the floor to see if there are footprints when you get back. Number 5, carbon monoxide detector. If you don't understand why, look it up on Reddit, a classic story. And number 6, edit. If one of your other posts you mentioned you like ghost stories and haunted house stories, could this be a ghost / haunted house story you are foisting upon us? And then the OP responds saying, questions 1 and 3 were already covered pretty much in my last sentence on the post, haha. No, I don't, but I do have them ordered. Number 4, yeah, those are good suggestions that I may utilize myself. And number 5, I have 2 actually, and she's referring to the carbon monoxide detectors, saying I have them because of the sticky note incident, which is the story I'm assuming you're referring to. And then the OP makes a chilling update to her original post, saying edit 2, culprit found. Not what I was expecting, but a handful of commenters were right. I'll update in a full post when I have a minute. I'm fine, I'm safe, I'm not in the house. And thanks to everyone expressing concern. I won't be staying in the house anymore. I'm going to find somewhere else to live in. And that is a terrifying update, but luckily the OP said they're fine, I'm safe, etc. But I'm just so curious as to who this mysterious person is because she said they found the culprit. So let's get into the next update. Hello everyone. If you're here from my previous post, thank you. If you haven't read that post, maybe read that one first to understand. First, a big thank you is in order. You were all very helpful in your suggestions, and quite a few of the comments were correct. If it wasn't for the insistence of the comments, I would have assumed I was still doing things correctly and maybe dead sooner rather than later. I called my older brother and asked him to come check out my house with me and see if there was something in the house that I was missing. He was able to get a look at the entry point at the top of the house. The screws weren't turnable, and he eventually abandoned the attempt to open it. There was a very unlikely chance that anyone was using this to get inside. But the scarier part is coming right now. Carbon monoxide was a big thing recommended as the culprit in my original post from the comment section. I informed most users that I have not 1, but 2 carbon monoxide detectors in my home. I was very convinced that wasn't the reason behind it. But my brother had decided to check my fuse box, which is located on the outside of my house. One of the fuses was turned off. It just so happened to be the fuse that was powering the outlets behind used for the carbon monoxide detectors in my house. He said with the recent freeze, it was possible that the fuse had frozen and then switched off gradually once the ice had thawed during the day. I don't know about all that, but it sounds plausible enough. Finally, once the fuse was turned back on, he recalibrated my carbon monoxide detectors. I admittedly don't know how to do this, and they were higher than normal levels of carbon monoxide detected in the house. With the heat running and without proper ventilation, I seem to have been doing these strange things in an altered state of mind, or just downright hallucinating. As for my ceiling tiles on the floor, I don't know, but it was near a closet. And when I looked at an old picture I had taken inside of the house when I was first trying to rent the property, I noticed a picture of the tiles hanging loosely from the base. It must have been one of those things that my brain defrags as irrelevant information and never fully noticed it. The falling was seemingly just a natural occurrence, and my brain conjured up further paranoia to fuel my delusion of an intruder. So that's it. Mystery solved. Thank you everyone for your helpful suggestions and concern for my well-being. It did not go unnoticed by me, and I apologize for wasting the community's time. I'm also going to get checked out tomorrow. I feel fine and I've been breathing natural air for a few hours now, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. Sending everyone really big hugs of gratitude. And this seems to be a very common reoccurrence. People's carbon monoxide detectors make them go a little bit crazy. And this is like the 5th story I've read now where the carbon monoxide detector is to blame, and carbon monoxide as a gas is to blame because, yeah, it will make you hallucinate, it'll make you crazy, and guess what? It can also kill you. A carbon monoxide leak in your house is very, very, very dangerous, and so please, everyone watching, make sure you have a carbon monoxide detector in your house or apartment because, you know, you could either go a little bit crazy like this lady, or you can literally die from it. And they're like 15 to 20 bucks on Amazon. Just buy one because it's much better to spend that money, get it installed, spend that time getting it installed than not waking up one day, because that happens to a lot of people every single year. And I have read literally 5 stories now on people who go crazy because of a carbon monoxide leak in their home. So yeah, this is just a very common reoccurrence, it seems now. And luckily, the OP didn't have some crazy guy going through her house and leaving stuff out that wasn't supposed to be out. But very, very concerning. But she's very lucky that she survived because this could have been a lot worse. But like I said, it's also good that there isn't a crazy guy going through her house or living in her attic or whatever. But very interesting thread. And on to the next one. I think my new landlord is schizophrenic and I'm running out of money. And the post reads as follows. For background, I, 29 female, have been really struggling with depression and grief for the last year and a half since my mom passed away. I ended up quitting my job about 2 months after she passed because my mood swings were unpredictable and I had received a large sum of money from the sale of my late grandparents' house. I moved in with my brother and his fiancée for 3 months, and it was incredibly toxic. I ended up going into an inpatient mental hospital, and they threw me out and changed the locks. I stayed in an Airbnb for 2 weeks until I found someone who was willing to rent to me while I technically had no income. I'll call her Susan. Susan called me very excitedly after I responded to her listing on Craigslist. It was a half duplex, 3-bedroom with a front porch and a yard for a very reasonable price. So I was excited too. I drove an hour to meet her and toured the apartment, and I loved it. It just needed a good cleaning. I ended up signing the lease the next day, and she chatted with me for over an hour. She's 67, has leukemia, and her husband passed away a few years ago. She has a son that lives a few states away and doesn't talk to her very often. She seemed to switch topics rapidly, but I just figured she was older and lonely and was excited to be talking to someone new, so I didn't think anything of it. Cut to a few days later. I moved in the day before and I hired cleaners. She'd been trying to clean the place herself, but her idea of clean and my idea of clean are very different. Plus, she shouldn't be doing that kind of physical labor. I told her about it already, and she seemed grateful and promised to reimburse me. The cleaners arrive, and she starts screaming at them. I told you to never set foot on my property again. You have 10 seconds to leave. I came out on the porch and tried to calm her down. I said, Susan, these are the company I hired to come clean. And she turned on me. I told you what she did to me, and you hired her. Am I going to have to evict you next? I spent the last week cleaning, and you hire cleaners? It's a slap in the face. Just bonkers. The owner of the cleaning company came to try and reason with her, and eventually she let it go. They cleaned, very rushed because they were clearly uncomfortable, and Susan was pleasant with me the next day. A couple days later, I wake up to a flashlight in my window. Susan is outside with 2 cop cars. By the time I put on pants and came downstairs, they were knocking on my door. The cops asked to come in and speak privately, and they said that Susan believes I was in her bedroom. I obviously wasn't, and they basically said, well, lock your doors, and if anything happens, call us. gave me the incident report number, and left. The next morning, I wake up to her pounding on my door, screaming at me. I opened it and recorded a full 5 minutes of her screaming at me about conversations that never happened. Things like me demanding for food and demanding a repairman. She taped an eviction notice written on a doily on my door and tried to wrestle my phone out of my hands. I called the cops on her. They came and told me to change the locks. She can't evict me without going to the courts, and told us to keep our distance. Since she has a key to my apartment, I put a heavy air conditioner in front of the door that night, and when I woke up, it had been pushed in about a foot. So now I have a chair wedged under the knob. And then the OP gives us an update 3 days later. Their update is titled, "Breaking My Lease After 8 Days Due to Paranoid Schizophrenic Landlord." And the post reads as follows. My main questions. Can I get my money back? Can she take legal action against me? I moved in on July 10th. I signed her 2-page lease for 1 year and gave her $3,300 at signing. First, last, security for $1,000 each, plus $300 for trash for the year. In just the last 8 days, she has accused a cleaner I'd hired of being someone who broke into the apartment and stole an air conditioner. This woman had never been to this property before. Accused me of being in her bedroom, calling the cops at 3 a.m. They spoke to me, told me to keep my doors locked, and call them if any issues arise. Let herself in at night while I was sleeping, and I'm 100% sure she stole my keys, but I can't prove it. $600 to change the locks and get a new key fob for my Subaru. Called the cops, but she wouldn't answer the door, so they said there was nothing more they could do. Just call a locksmith and try to bill her. Multiple nights, she's pounded on our shared bedroom wall between 2 and 4 a.m., lasting up to 30 minutes. Screamed at me for conversations that never happened. She seems to think that I've demanded she give me food and yelled at her about repairing the attic stairs. Neither of these happened. Physically assaulted me by trying to wrestle my phone out of my hands inside my apartment. Called the cops on this one too. They're issuing her a citation, however. She's been stealing my mail. I finally set up a camera and I'm going to catch her tomorrow. I'm tired of wedging a chair under my doorknob at night. I'm tired of being woken up in the middle of the night. I'm tired of being scared to leave my cats home alone. I'm tired of this costing me so much money. Moving twice, changing the locks, buying a camera, paying to start a second lease at a new place. I'm broke and I'm pissed. I can move into a new apartment as early as Monday, but I'm unsure how to proceed. Can I write a letter to her asking to give me my money back or else being legal action? Or should I go straight to getting a lawyer? Please, help. I've been out of my mind anxious this entire week. And then the OP makes an update later that day saying suspected landlord of stealing my mail, so I set up a camera. Unfortunately, I didn't get any mail today. She didn't even check her own mailbox. Man, I can't sign up for USPS informed delivery because I'm pretty sure she stole the change of address confirmation letter with the code I needed. And the OP posted a video alongside of this, but the video is no longer accessible, so let's just read the video transcript. Camera angle shows a covered front deck showing view of 2 entryways that are side by side. A bicycle leans on the rail. Neighboring houses can be seen in the background. A barefooted woman with hair and a bun on top of her head exits one door, wearing what is clearly a tank top / shorts pajama set in white with butterflies on them. She goes directly to the mailbox by the other door, lifts the lid, looks inside, and then returns into the door she exited from. The clip is short, only 5 seconds long. And then the OP makes a final update saying, I have proof my landlord stole and hid my keys. What now? Today, Susan asked me to have a chat with her on the front porch. I started recording. First, she apologized for her behavior, saying she was without her heart medicine for 8 days, and that's why she was acting crazy. But then she went right back into being rude. She told me changing the locks was illegal. A cop literally told me to. I said, well, now you'll have nice new locks and I'll give you the keys when I leave. She said she doesn't trust me and she needs the original key back. So I said, I can't. My keys went missing. And then she admitted to taking them and throwing them on the porch by the fish tank. The fish tank was gone before my keys went missing. Later, she showed me that they were in a bush in front of the porch the whole time, and I recorded this too. But here's the problem. I asked her when she took them, and she thinks she took them out of my hands. This never happened. She also thinks she took them because she was mad I changed the locks, which obviously wasn't the case. I changed the locks because my keys were missing. What can I do here legally? I have video of her admitting to taking them and hiding them, and also video of her digging them out of the bush, but she's insane and doesn't have good memory. It's her word against mine about when she stole them. I'm 100% sure she came in at night and took them. She claims she took them out of my hands. And then the OP makes one final update saying, I'm getting the keys to my new place on Monday and I'm getting the fuck out. And then a few days later, she makes a post saying, yes, I'm out and safe. Thanks for asking. And that is the last we have heard from the OP, but God, what a nightmare. The OP informed us on how horrible her year had already been. Her mom passed away and she was just having a really tough time personally. And then she gets her own place finally, and it's a paranoid schizophrenic landlord and breaking into her house, stealing her stuff, calling the cops on her. I mean, I just feel so bad for the OP here. Like, they just could not catch a break. But luckily, it seems like they finally caught a break, got a new place, and hopefully all is well there. Hopefully the OP got their money back and all that. But yeah, we have not received any more updates, but I wish OP the best, and I hope everything's good now because, God, that was just a series of disturbing events. I found my brother-in-law's Reddit account, and I'm genuinely terrified for my family. And the post reads as follows. First and foremost, I will not be sharing brother-in-law's username. I know this will cause most people to call this post fake, but his account has a lot of private information about many members of my family, including what are essentially dox bins and other private info. He does not know I know about this account, and I don't want anyone to go to his account to leave comments or message him. I'm 21 female. My sister, Jane, who's 28 female, has been with John, who's 27 male, for 2 years. I found his account totally randomly. I googled his name as he's a journalist and found a Reddit account with the same name. Think John _Doe is dead 1997. I clicked on it and found tons of Reddit posts ranting about his girlfriend's family, mainly her little sister. At first, I thought I just came across a random disturbed individual, but clicking on the posts revealed much more. Both my sister and I have unique names. Not super rare, but uncommon enough that they're noticeable in a list of names, and neither of us have met anyone with the same names as us. Plus, our surnames aren't super basic either. Think Aura Fernsberry. Fake, but similar name to myself. He also mentions enough personal details for it to be undeniably him. I wouldn't be writing this unless I was 99% sure. The posts are all either posted to vent/rant subs or straight to his Reddit page. They all have like 0 to 3 upvotes and a few comments spread across from what I can tell to be 100 posts. They're all mostly complaining about Jane, me, or our mother. The most concerning post is about me though. I have a varied past with men, mainly influenced by SA. I'm in therapy, but it has made me a lot more wary among men I do/don't know. This apparently enrages John. In this post, he details out how he plans to offer to drive me home next I visit them. But instead of taking me home, he'll detour and take the scenic route through the country lanes in our town. He says he wants to make me afraid enough that I'll do something to her. But after 15 or so minutes, he'll turn around and drive me home, therefore showing me that not all men are creeps and want to hurt her. His logic seems to be that since he acted weird but didn't hurt me, it should click in her brain that not all men are bad. The post is very long, like scrolling down for 15 seconds long, but he rants about how it's unfair that I flinch around him when he makes big gestures or yells at the TV, because he'd never do anything. He says he can fix me more than my therapist. A lot of the post is weird incel-y talking points. I was bawling reading the whole thing. There's one comment telling him to get help, but John just responds, "I don't need help. She does." His comment history is also concerning. A lot of weird incel talking points, which doesn't make sense as he has a girlfriend. I'm not super versed in incel ideology. A lot of stuff about SA, women's roles in relationships/society, other races, ethnicities, religions, etc. I'm terrified of John. We weren't close before, but we didn't hate each other. To me, he was just a grown man with a vastly different interests, and we would never mesh cleanly. Now, I don't know what to think. My mind is frazzled. I'm going to tell my sister, but I don't know how. I have screenshots of everything, links, etc. I just don't know how to lay it all out. Also, I need coping mechanisms. I'm in a constant state of pre-panic attack. I can feel it in my chest, but it's not tipping over into a full panic attack, which is making me genuinely crazy. I'm sorry for the long post, but thanks in advance. Edit. As of 2 hours ago, I made my mom and uncle aware of what I found. Every screenshot, screen recording, and link. My sister is currently on a work trip, so we're waiting for her to come back in 2 days. His account is still up as of 20 minutes ago. Thanks for all your advice. Mom, uncle, and I are figuring out the best way to tell my sister. And now let's get into some comments. Someone says, "Ooh, I did not want to be the first comment here. This is so much to unpack. Do you think your sister will believe you? Talk to your parents/family first. They should hear about your fear before they hear from your sister that you're talking shit. Is your sister safe?" I have no clue what else to say other than I'm going to come back in case anyone has coping mechanisms for your pre-panic attack thing. I'm experiencing the same thing, and it's also driving me insane. Pre-panic attack is a good way to describe it. I've been struggling with it for years, and there's no medical term for it, so thanks for giving it a name. And then the OP responds saying, "Is your sister safe?" This is why I want to tell her ASAP, because I don't know. Not anymore anyway. They seem happy together, but now I'm rethinking everything. Thanks for your advice. Another commenter says, "Why is he so obsessed with you? He has a girlfriend and prefers to vent about you. Are you that close to him? He is not in a normal place mentally. Show the text to your sister and mother. He can be abusive to your sister." And then the OP responds saying, "We're not close. I live closer to my sister than any of our family, so I see her/him fairly often. But I never go to see him. He's usually just there, which is fair because it's his home too. But I never go with the reason of hanging out with John. Just my sister. We're not close. We don't have much in common, but get along well enough. I had no interest in being his friend or anything before for many obvious reasons, but especially now. I have no idea why he's so obsessed with me. It's freaking me out." Another commenter says, "How does he know so much about your trauma? Who told him? That's a very important question to solve beforehand." And then the OP responds saying, "Last year, when I was SA'd by my now ex, I ended up calling John to pick me up because my ex lived in a different city and was supposed to give me a ride back. I had a breakdown in his car and told him what happened. I hadn't intended to tell anybody about what happened, but I couldn't keep it in. Also, my sister and I both witnessed abuse from our father, which I'm sure she told John about, and he correctly assumed I was also inflicted." Another commenter says, "Does this mean your parents aren't safe advocates in this situation?" And then the OP responds saying, "No, not at all. I'm planning on telling my mom too. The no telling anyone about the SA comment was more of a spur of the moment traumatized and mortified 19-year-old. And then the OP responds to a troll saying, "But I don't think all men are evil. John literally just projected that onto me. He wrote that assumption in a post where he detailed graphically how he wanted to make me fear for my own safety to fix me because he's upset I have trauma and CPTSD. and I'm somehow as creepy as he is and terrifying? I would love a deep dive into how you can go to that conclusion, because reading some Reddit posts don't feel the same as what John is doing / planning to do. And then the OP gives us an update about 2 months later, and the update reads as follows. As I mentioned in my last post, I had made my mom and uncle aware of the situation. We all agreed that waiting for Jane to come back home from a work trip to tell her was the best course of action. When she got back, we sat her down to explain everything. I showed her the screenshots, the posts, and walked her through everything John had said. She was quiet at first, just reading through the messages with this shocked look on her face. She started accusing me of overreacting or somehow getting the situation wrong. She said that maybe John was just venting and didn't actually mean any of it. She also suggested that I might be reading too much into his post because of my past trauma. My mom and uncle tried to step in and back me up, but Jane wasn't having it. She kept saying that we were blowing things out of proportion and that we didn't understand John like she does. At this point, she was getting really upset and we were all talking over each other. Then Jane said that I've always been distant from John and that maybe he felt uncomfortable around me because of how I act. At that point, I was done. I made it clear that if she decided to stay with him, I would have to limit my contact with both of them. My mom and uncle backed me up on this, and we all said that we couldn't trust John to be a part of our lives anymore after seeing what he wrote. Jane stormed out of the house after that. She's barely spoken to me since, except for a couple of cold texts saying she needs to process the situation. On Monday, it's Wednesday tonight, Jane showed up to my door, completely unannounced. She looked like she hadn't slept, and the first thing she did was apologize. I was shocked because I wasn't expecting her to come around so quickly. She told me that after she left, she couldn't stop thinking about the posts, and she started going back over everything in her head. She said she told John about the situation, and when I went to check, all his stuff had been deleted. This annoyed me and my mom, who was on the phone, as we told Jane to keep quiet for safety reasons. Luckily, I have all the evidence saved. She said that John had blocked me on everything to preserve his career, and that he was super pissed off with me for stalking him. He even told my sister that the account wasn't him, rather someone at work who hates him. I obviously don't know everything that happened between them, but it's caused a rift between them. I've moved in with my uncle for the time being, as I was afraid of John showing up on these first few nights. We looked into legal options about the post, but found nothing that would help us. My uncle said he's going to help me get in contact with his work, but I'm scared of John's reaction if I did that. As of current, my sister isn't totally settled on leaving John, so I've gone LC with her. She said her reasons for staying with John is because she just can't see John acting like this. Luckily, I have friends and family who are on my side. I'm sorry this update is kind of bleak. And that is the last update we have received from the OP, and it's been about a year since we've heard from her, so I think this is going to be the last update on the situation. I think my boyfriend is stalking me. And the post reads as follows. I recently moved to a new state a few hours away from where my boyfriend lives. This was for school, and also because I had an issue where my boyfriend hid a camera in our bedroom, so he was spying on me. Okay, already very concerning. It pretty much ruined our relationship. Behind my apartment building is an old parking deck. No one parks back there, and it is patrolled by the police. A few weeks after I moved in, I noticed an old truck parking at the top directly across from my window where they could see inside. Like, he parked where his window lined up with mine. It was during strange hours like 3 or 4 in the morning. I started closing my blinds at night. It was such a strange thing too, because it's not like they could see inside very well, and I'm only sleeping with the covers wrapped around me. I couldn't believe that someone would really park across the street to watch a stranger sleep. Anyways, they kept coming back. I'd peek out the blinds and the truck would be there about once a week. I couldn't figure out who it was, just the color of the truck. I started thinking about a comment my boyfriend made about how from the parking deck you could see straight inside my windows. I didn't think much of it at the time because it seemed obvious that someone would be able to, but I started to wonder if maybe he was the one driving up there at night. My boyfriend doesn't own an old truck, but my dad does that matches the truck I keep seeing. To be fair, it is a generic white Ford. And he mentioned he's been letting my boyfriend borrow it. Also, this never happens when my boyfriend is there. I am terrified. I do want to break up with him, but now I'm afraid that the stalking will get worse. I'm hoping it's a weird stranger, but for reasons, I do believe it's him. And to be honest, I mean, I don't know why she's wishing it's a weird stranger, because either way, it's concerning. I think whether or not it's her boyfriend or a weird stranger, it's equally as concerning. And to be honest, she should call the cops when he's there next, or when the stalker's there. But now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, that is a lot to unpack. How many weeks? You then decide to close blinds? Who doesn't know dad's old truck? I don't know why someone would just watch someone sleep. I'm under the covers, but blinds open, closed. Can you actually see a person in there? Boyfriend mentioned this spot and seen in your place. I could have asked dad immediately at 3 a.m. Where's your truck? I think I'm looking at it. Dates? Cams in bedroom? Dad stopped loaning the truck out? Who doesn't know their dad's truck, even if it's secondary or the work truck? If you're still calling him boyfriend and establish it's the truck, why don't you just bang on the window with the police in tow and inform him that he is no longer a boyfriend, even a weird obsessed one? Would knock on the door. Sorry, but to me, your story doesn't sound right. Whether this is real or not, please try and get the help you need. And then the OP responds to the commenter saying, well, to clarify, when I first saw the truck, I thought someone just parked there for whatever reason. I closed my blinds, then I opened them the next night. When I saw the truck again a couple weeks later, I thought it was weird again and kept them shut, this time for weeks. The same night that I finally felt comfortable to open them again, I saw the truck was back. I took a picture and could make out a person sitting in the seat, but it's not detailed. I also can't see the license plate because of how they are parked. It's just a generic white Ford truck owned by many people, which is why it took me so long to think about my dad's truck and the possibility of it being him. And then the OP gives us an update saying, I'm happy to say he is now my ex. He did not take the news well and broke my phone, which is why it took me time to update because I had to get a new one. I did confront him about the stalking. He told me I was crazy and said that women don't know cars, so it could have been a white van instead of a white truck. He also said the person might be working or busy doing something. He was unconcerned about the situation, so either it was him or he doesn't care that someone is looking into my windows. I told him the next time I was calling the police. Either way, it has stopped. I'm 90% sure it's him because of these stupid excuses. Who drives to an empty parking garage and parks directly across from someone's window to work instead of all the other empty spaces and floors that aren't facing my window? I talked to my dad, and my boyfriend has been borrowing his truck for months now. Apparently, he told my dad it was for work, so I did speak to my dad about taking his truck back. As for why my dad lent out his truck, they live in the same town. I am the one who moved away to a new state by myself. I've checked my bedroom for hidden cameras. There are none that are obvious, but I feel like there could still be one. If anyone has tips for finding hidden cameras, let me know. And I mean, there is just so much to unpack here. I mean, in the first post, the OP said, we had an issue where my boyfriend hid a camera in our bedroom, so he was spying on me, and they were still together. I mean, that's concerning enough, and so obviously she's concerned about another one. And I think it's crazy how her ex-boyfriend said, girls don't know truck, so it might be a white van instead of a white truck. I just thought that was kind of funny because it's so ridiculous. Oh, girls don't know cars. It could have been a white van. Doesn't matter. I don't know. That's just funny because you can just tell how ignorant and stupid this boyfriend is, who's obviously stalking the OP. But let's get into some comments here. Someone says, please go to the police and lodge a report. You need to create a paper trail in case this escalates. You often need multiple incidences on record before the police will do anything. Consider getting some Nest cameras to record the area outside and around your front door and bedroom window. Just because it has stopped doesn't mean he might not start up again. Take a few proactive steps now to protect yourself just in case. Be safe, OP. And I completely agree, because if this guy was stalking her before, he's not going to just stop. Like, these guys usually keep going unless they get in big trouble. So the OP has to be very careful with how they approach it, and they need to protect themselves by, like the commenter said, getting cameras, etc. And someone responded saying this, and go to a domestic violence shelter, even if only for the paper trail and contact of someone who can step in and help you if his behavior escalates. Now that you've left him, there is a very high chance it will. Someone else comments regarding the cameras saying, many cameras emit infrared light. There are apps for phones that can help you discover these lights. Plus, you may want to seek a counselor because this is a traumatic experience and paranoia can be debilitating if not treated. Best of luck to you. And then everyone else is saying how idiotic he is and how scary it is, because yeah, very scary. And unfortunately, we have not received a single update ever since this final update, so I don't know what happened, but to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if the OP's ex-boyfriend kept stalking her, because if he sat out there every single night for weeks, like, he's not going to just stop now that she confronted him. And he might even be like more motivated now because she broke up with him, so he might be more motivated to stalk her and do whatever he's doing. Very creepy. And I just hope the OP is safe and well, and I hope the situation did not escalate, and I hope she listened to some of the Reddit commenters advice and went to the police, let them know to create a paper trail. But anyways, hopefully she's safe, and on to the next one. I found a hidden camera pointed at where I breastfeed my baby. God, that is terrifying. But now let's get into the post. I'm honestly kind of freaking out right now. For context, I'm a teen mom to my 7-month-old daughter. I recently started nannying again because I needed the income, and I took a job that wasn't ideal. 2 kids in my neighborhood for $16 an hour. I used to study child health and development in college before I dropped out to raise my daughter, and I've got about a year and a half of nannying experience. I found this family on Care, and looking back, there were so many red flags. She had no profile picture. She refused a phone interview, saying she only does in person because she can tell character better that way. She used military time for everything, so I assumed she was ex-military. She's not. And she insisted on meeting at school, not a coffee shop or anywhere public, I suggested. She was 15 minutes late and showed up in short shorts, no bra, slippers, and high socks. Not exactly the strict, polished person I expected based on her tone over text. She had 3 kids, 6 female, 4 female, and almost 2 male. The interview actually went okay, and because she lived nearby, I accepted the job on the spot. She mentioned paying me as a 1099 contractor, which is illegal for household employees in my state, so I told her she'd either need to do under the table cash or a proper W-2. She chose cash, but refused to sign a contract because she didn't want paper trails. Another red flag I should have listened to. During the interview, I specifically said no secret nanny cams. She told me she only had 2 cameras, both in her kids' room, which I am completely fine with. But then weird comments started happening. One day, I served the kids some fruit that was already cut up in the fridge. Later, she mentioned, "You forgot to wash it." Another time, she brought up a snack I had packed for my daughter, one I never left at her house. She mentioned me wiping down her counters with a reusable towel, something she couldn't have known unless she was watching me. She also somehow knew I use voice to text because of my dyslexia, something else I never told her. At that point, I assumed there was a hidden camera or microphone somewhere, which was super off-putting, considering she knew I breastfed my daughter and had specifically asked if there was any cameras. The vibe in general was just off. She made really degrading comments, like saying she doesn't understand why anyone would go to college for child development and strictly referring to me as a babysitter. She was dismissive, controlling, and constantly added new chores on top of childcare to the point that I could barely focus on the kids. Her daughter would also say some weird and concerning things. For example, my mom's gonna be mad, but it's okay because she won't be mad at me. The floors are really dirty. You need to sweep them. And one time she went on a minute tangent about silly, forgetful people who always forget everything after I left my lunchbox at their house overnight, along with this and some other stuff. And she said I just assumed she was repeating stuff her mother had said. But today was the breaking point. My daughter wasn't feeling well, so she wanted to be held most of the day. The 2-year-old knocked over a set of picture frames on himself. The house was not at all child-friendly. The 4-year-old had multiple meltdowns, and when I tried to calm her, she started kicking and hitting me. I let the mom know I'd need to leave early, and she agreed as long as both kids were down for a nap first. While I was feeding my daughter before leaving, I noticed the Alexa was flashing green every time I spoke. I Googled it and learned that means there's a drop in basically. Someone is listening in. That's when I started to look around the home, and sure enough, I found a hidden camera tucked inside an open purse, pointed directly at the chair where I breastfeed my daughter. I froze. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my baby, packed up our stuff, and left without unloading the dishwasher. A few hours later, she sent me a long text rant about clarifying expectations. Basically, she wanted me to be a maid, not a nanny, all while watching 3 kids. After talking to my husband, I've decided that I'm quitting immediately. I'm still shaking that someone recorded me feeding my baby without consent. I'll update once I officially quit and send her my message, but seriously, trust your gut. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says 2 words. Police report. Someone else replies to that saying, holy shit, OP, that's absolutely disgusting and definitely illegal in most places. Recording someone breastfeeding without consent is a serious crime, like exploitation level serious. Document everything you can remember and definitely file that police report ASAP. The fact that she was so sketchy about paper trails makes way more sense now. She knew exactly what she was doing. Someone else says, call the cops, call the cops, call the cops. If possible, take a picture of the camera spot, assuming you're ever going back there. Someone else says, I would report to the police and the website. It's unbelievable that not only would she be recording you like a weirdo, but also using you as a maid when you were hired to take care of the kids. But for real, how do you know she's not selling videos of you? She sounds off the rails. And I'd even make that connection. That's totally true. If she's recording it, she could be posting it somewhere or doing God knows what with the videos, which is so terrifying. And now the OP gives us an update. Let's get into it. I found a hidden camera pointed at where I breastfeed my baby. I forgot to mention in my last post that I unplugged both the cameras and the Alexa before I left that day. Between that and my mom, who's a therapist and have talked to her before, strongly believing she's a narcissist, I decided I will not be returning. My mom actually helped me write a text to keep things calm and avoid any retaliation. The nanny mom knows where I live, so we wanted to be careful with how I worded it. Here is what I sent her. Thank you for sharing your concerns. Today was definitely a rough one with sick kids, lack of sleep, and a lot of challenging behaviors. After reflecting, I feel that with the expectations and the different ages, this position isn't the best fit for me. For safety reasons, I believe it would be better for you to find someone else. 2 male knocking down the picture frames today because I was preoccupied with 4 female, and my daughter has really shown me that it would be best for me to step away immediately for everybody's safety. And to be honest, that was a very, very respectful and chill response in my opinion, or a text. Like, if that was me, I'd be like, hey weirdo, why the fuck are you recording me when you said you wouldn't be recording me or have any sort of cameras? Like, that was a very calm and collected response. But then she replied with, okay, wow, that was pretty unexpected. I disagree with the immediate safety concern, especially being that he is 20 months old and didn't do it with malicious intent, but I respect your decision. I will calculate your time and pay you accordingly. My mom said this is a typical response of a narcissist, taking her child faults as her own. I just replied, thank you, and she did end up paying me, but only about 1/3 of what I was owed. Here's the message she sent with the payment. Paid. 30 minutes removed for unfulfilled obligations that I had to tend during my lunch today, and 6 hours removed for previous overpayment of miscalculated hours. Thank you for your time with us. Oh my God, that just pisses me off. 30 minutes removed, and like that's just, okay, I'm not even gonna get into that. That is just wild that she paid her 1/3 of what she owed. But let's continue. The unfulfilled obligations she's talking about, dishes. I'd already cleaned, but didn't put away from the night before when I wasn't even working, and not sweeping the floors. Also, looking back, I feel like there was a lot of mind games she would play with me through stuff she heard and saw, including her miscalculating the hours. She randomly started counting my 5 hours days as 6 hours and would constantly mention it and write it on my clock-in sheet. I don't know if she was testing me, it just feels odd. She would also constantly repeat that she was a good person and had good morals, even sometimes going as far as repeating she's a good person 3 times in the same conversation. I haven't filed the police report, but I also don't have any photos. I've reported her to the CARE website, and she already has a post up. I'm planning to check in occasionally to see if it's taken down, and she hired somebody else. They sort of live in my neighborhood, so maybe I'll be able to catch the nanny on a walk and give her a heads up. They also had a nanny before me that left abruptly as well. A few people pointed out in my last post that I was being severely underpaid. You're right. I've already started looking for other nanny positions and have been offered $22 to $25 an hour, which just confirms how much I was being taken advantage of. And then the OP makes a quick edit saying, it has been about 4 days. I mentioned I had found her on CARE. I saw a post up now. She's offering $15 to $18 an hour. The $18 an hour is a lie. I doubted she'd find anyone in that price range, but sure enough, her post is taken down. I looked in her account, still up, so I assume she found a new nanny. I took the long way to work and drove by her house, and sure enough, a mom of 1 or 2 kids was standing outside holding their baby. Can't help to think she's trying to do this to another mother. I'm afraid to say anything to this mom because what if it's her family? Once again, my mom has practically diagnosed her as a narcissist, and I'm terrified of what she would do given she knows where I live. And now let's get into some comments. Someone says, I didn't understand how you left the first post. Weren't you watching children? Did you leave them alone in that house? I'm not being negative. I would be very angry to be on an unknown camera, even if I wasn't breastfeeding. And then the OP responds saying, no, the mother worked upstairs from home. And then some people ask if the OP should post the information on Nextdoor and other nannying sites. And the OP said, I've thought about this. I posted it in a local nannies group just to give people a heads up. Another commenter says, tell her that she either pays you everything you're owed or you'll sue her for failing to pay you properly and videoing you. She violated the law by paying you, not as an employee. Another commenter says, I understand why you're reluctant to file a police report, especially since you don't have any evidence, but I really urge you to call CPS and tell them about secretly being filmed while breastfeeding. That's literally exploitation. In fact, a good reason to just file the report anyway, whether you have concrete evidence or not, is that the video is likely to end up being posted online for profit or otherwise. This woman is a predator. That doesn't necessarily mean that she's a direct danger to her children, but I think a person who secretly records a baby being breastfed might also be doing similar things with the kids. Even if the kids aren't being exploited, the fact remains that their mother is a predator. If you don't call CPS, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if those children are safe. And having said all that, I feel even more certain that you need to talk to the police. She didn't just record you, she recorded your baby. There's a certain kind of predator out there who likes breastfeeding specifically because it involves a child. If someone secretly recorded my child in any setting, I'd go scorched earth. You are not taking this seriously enough. And that is the last update we have ever got from the OP regarding that situation. But wow, I wonder what happened to the OP. I wonder what they ended up doing. I wonder if the OP ended up filing a police report or doing nothing or possibly reporting it to CPS or doing whatever. I'm unsure, but hopefully the OP took the right steps to, further prevent this from happening to another mother or nanny or what have you. But very creepy scenario, and I just wonder what came of it. On to the next one. My wife abandoned my girls when she thought there was a home invasion. And the post reads as follows. My 34 male wife, who's 42 female, is a stay-at-home mom. Last week when I was at work and my two oldest were at school, 5 male and 3 male, my wife was sitting at the dining room table when she saw a man walking down the driveway and going to the front door. He had what she thought was a hammer. She went to the front door and the guy was trying to get in. The guy saw her and waved and tried to get in. She fled the house and ran out the back door. She left her cell phone and Apple Watch. She also left our twin girls, 8-month-olds. They were sleeping in their cribs. She ran through the neighborhood looking for someone to help her call the police. Eventually, she found someone and they called the police. The police responded and cleared the house. Turns out it was a repair guy who was supposed to go to our neighbor's house and had been told that no one else would be home and to just come in. She is mad at me for not being more supportive of her. I was stunned when she told me and was surprised when she said she left the girls. She is always yelling at me about how I don't do enough for the kids, unlike her who sacrifices constantly. I don't think that is accurate, but it is besides the point. We have been having major issues in our marriage for a long time apart from this. She's acting like this is one of the most traumatic events of her life, which is making me madder and madder. I'm having a real hard time putting this one behind me. If this guy had actually been a bad guy, she would have abandoned our girls to him, also she could save herself. Our house isn't that big, and people in the neighborhood and online know we have 2 little girls. I honestly don't know what to do. And then the OP makes an edit saying, this happened about a week ago. I spent about an hour on the phone with her that day trying to console her. I tried again that night and have been trying to take care of the kids and do all the chores at home. She has been focusing on what I think is a work from home job, but that she is lying to me about and trying to hide it from me. Other than that, she is going out with her friends to bars. She does not believe in therapy and is refusing to go to marriage counseling that I set up for us online after the kids go to sleep. A big issue I'm having is the double standard that if I had done this, she would have never forgiven me and probably divorced me. We had a fight because when we moved to a new house, my side of the bed was on the far side from the door and that I need to be able to stop an attacker. I've been yelled at for abandoning my daughters when I take a shower in the morning before work and they begin crying. Or if she is sleeping in and one begins crying while I'm changing the other's diaper and it takes me a minute to finish. I totally understand this is a fight or flight and I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback. I have not critiqued, let alone criticized her. The closest was when I was surprised when she told me she left the girls. Other than that call, or when I came home and she was annoyed that we don't have security cameras, we haven't really talked about it. Second edit. She has a phone that worked. I texted her to check in and she told me to call her. And that's when I found out about this. When the kids are sleeping, she usually has it. It's a 1-story house. It's an L shape. The doors are at one other end of the L and the kids are on the other end. I don't know how long it took for her to get help. It was in the workday and most of our neighbors work. It's a walkable neighborhood, not in the country somewhere. I am currently in therapy. She has mocked me in the past for going to therapy and uses that as a way to invalidate my opinions. What do you know? You're just a depression case. So there's no way she will see a therapist. The police had a social worker with them who gave her a card for a therapist. And a lot of the comments under this post are really split. Some people are saying the wife's reaction is completely justified, and the other half is saying the wife's reaction is not justified at all, and she should have saved her kids or even just approached the situation differently, because seeing a guy in the middle of the day, broad daylight, waving at you, smiling with a hammer, you'd be like, hey, what's up? I don't think you would immediately think it's a murderer, but that's just my opinion and a lot of the other commenters. But then the OP gives us an update, so let's get into that. The OP says, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to thank everyone for all their comments and advice. I wanted to provide an update. Long story short, things are not going well. I feel like I am an airplane pilot who is trying to land a plane while it is also disintegrating around me, and that the time is now for me to bail out. I am also realizing how much I have normalized these issues, and that my good days would be at best marginal days for other marriages, but more likely would be awful. Since that post, I have really tried to do what I can to support her. I think I've been doing what I could to support her in the past. Anytime she wants to leave, she can. I do the lion's share of the chores at home. That means laundry, cooking, groceries, and morning and bedtime routines for the boys, who are school age. We do an informal system for dishes and the girls for the baths. It's close to 50-50 on that one. I also pay all the bills and handle all of the extracurriculars. One comment that people made was that she just gave birth 8 months ago, and that I should be more sympathetic. I totally get that. But since she gave birth, she has done 4 10K races, a marathon relay, and goes to a run group and dinner afterwards twice a week. She has also gone to networking events for her business that she is working on. Since that post, we've had numerous issues. We've had more days with screaming matches than here is a list of issues since the post. She woke up early on Saturdays, but didn't wake me or my son up for his early practice. I slept through my alarm. Didn't do anything to help us get ready. Her only question when he came back was how late we were. The moment I came home, she went back to bed. I had all 4 kids by myself, which is fine. I took the kids to the store to run errands. As soon as I came back in, she got in a shower and left, and refused to take any kids despite their cries. She refused to tell us where she was going. Sunday, she refused to go to anyone's hockey practice because she had to clean the house. While I am going to park at the rink with my kids crying, she calls me because she had hired a person to clean out her garage and wanted to know where we were going to move things. This was the first time I had heard of this. The woman did a good job of cleaning the garage, but she threw everything in the dumpster, including like unopened dress shirts. We had a thermonuclear fight on Monday. My eldest was screaming at me to get a second helping of dinner ready. I tried bluffing to send him to bed without the second helping. He goes straight to her, and she overrules me. Once they leave the room, I explain what I was doing, and she spiked her laptop on the bed and jumps up and starts screaming at me. Proceeds to follow me out of the room and is screaming in front of all 4 kids that I am a whiny bitch and not a real man, and that I'm trying to starve her kids. Funnily enough, this was just before our marriage counseling session. I kept it, and while I was in the waiting room, she continued screaming at me and attacking my character. When the session started, she refused to join. She was puttering around and started blending something. I tried to be as objective as possible, and the counselor said that she was impressed with that. In the last 5 minutes, I tried to just bring my laptop to her. When I did, she collapsed into the room she was in like Superman seeing kryptonite. She refused to do it. After that, I went to bed, and she woke me up and wanted me to set up our printer. We changed routers, and I hadn't had the chance to set it up yet. The lack of anger caught me off guard, and so I did it. She stood over my shoulder the entire time, silently, and refused to let me see anything. We had a couple of other fights along the same lane, but yesterday, Thanksgiving, we had a decent day. Not that it was overly affectionate, we just didn't fight. She slept in until like 12:50 in the afternoon and was snippy because I didn't have everyone ready yet. She wanted the girls in the car seats. She then began a 90-minute shower and makeup routine and helped with the kids for maybe 20 minutes. We ended up an hour late for Thanksgiving dinner, but for us, that was a good day. Yeah, there was no affection or anything, and we didn't speak in the car, but yeah, my mind forgot all the issues we had been having, and I wanted to make it work. That night, I woke up and attended to one of my girls who's very sick. That is the one thing that she has done exclusively, is attend to the kids when they wake up. She has taken kids from me when I do get up before her. She says that is because I'm working. One fight we had in September, she screamed at me as being selfish for taking my daughter and sitting with her. I had said that I didn't mind and that I was up anyway, and that became somehow me keeping her up because I couldn't sleep. The problem is this has become a trump card in every argument. But anyway, I was with my daughter from 4 to 5 and she slept in. This morning, I woke up at 9, the latest I've slept in that I can remember. I started making the kids breakfast and finishing the laundry. She was working on her laptop already. She snapped that I shouldn't bother cleaning the house because she had hired someone. I tried very, very hard and refused to escalate. but told her that we can't really afford a cleaning lady and that I've got it. She proceeded to call me a little bitch and scream at me in my face in front of my kids. One of my boys ran and hid, and the other sat and read on the couch, but he was not happy. She blamed me for not having time to clean and not having money, and that I couldn't clean or do laundry to her standards, and that she wasn't a cleaner. It was about an hour of just constant abuse. So I spent today cleaning the house, doing laundry, and taking care of all 4 kids. My sons did more cleaning than she has for a month. What has me really disturbed is not the abuse towards me. I've normalized that and I'm used to it. And honestly, if she kept it behind closed doors, I was prepared to wait out the next 17 years and leave once my kids were out of the house. But my eldest son is clearly mirroring her behaviors and internalizing the stress. It doesn't help that she constantly wants me to ask him who is his favorite, who yells more, and who is the better parent. When I refuse to do that, I am scared of what he might say. I guess Reddit that I don't know what to do. I am trying to fix this. I'm keeping an appointment scheduled with a counselor, but beyond that, other than talking to a lawyer, I don't know what I should do. She honestly doesn't see any issues with how she treats me. Her refrain is that I am a diamond, and if you leave me, you'll only be dating pebbles. Besides that fact that I don't want a divorce, and she spent the last 6 years threatening a divorce, I don't know I can show anyone who is that out of touch with reality, or seemingly so closed off from recognizing that they have a role in causing and fixing the problems with the marriage. And wow, man, that really did seem to spiral after the whole fake intruder situation. I mean, that was the catalyst for what seems like a spiraling, just a train wreck, because it was the wife leaving their kids when she thought it was a robber, and then he realized how many issues they're having. And I'm sorry that turned out to be like a drama story. I didn't think it was gonna be a drama story with how that first initial post was read, but it did. But let me know down below if you'd like to see more family drama stories kind of like that. I thought it was a little bit interesting because it's just like, what's going on? The wife left the kids behind when she thought I was a robber. Whether or not you think that's right, I thought it was pretty interesting how the OP reacted to it. But yeah, comment down below if you'd like to see more stories like that in the future. But man, I do not see how the OP is going to save this one, and we have not gotten an update in 2 years. So I wonder if they stayed together or got divorced or what happened. But I guess we'll never know. Maintenance man at my job repeatedly threatened to, quote, blow someone's brains out. And the post reads as follows. And then this is quoting the OP's text messages. This is how the OP starts it. But the OP says, the police didn't do anything. Probably texted you, but I just wanted to say that I'm pretty sure Chris aimed a gun at someone at the hotel and talked about, quote, wanting to blow someone's brains out multiple times before leaving the property at 10 p.m. And then the manager responds saying, Merry Christmas. Thank you for letting me know. I will look into it and take care of it. Enjoy your holiday. And then the OP leaves some context saying, we work at a hotel. And he was going off earlier about how someone was tampering with his truck and how if he or I found you, you need to call me and then the police because I'm going to blow someone's brains out. Later, I get 2 guest complaints about someone screaming and pounding on doors. I call the non-emergency and they find nothing, so they leave. Later, Chris walks down. He was supposed to leave at 4 p.m. It's now 9 p.m. And I'm like, hey, Chris, that screaming was crazy. Do you know what room it was? And he's like, oh, that was me. Someone kept twisting the door and I almost shot the fucker, haha. And made the motions of pulling out a gun and aiming it. I'm freaking out internally. His eyes are really wide, and I secretly call my front desk manager and tell her what happened. He finally left at 10 p.m. and I texted my GM. Am I going crazy? Or is this an insane response to me fearing for my life? Chris is in his 40s and I'm 19 female. I don't really know how to handle or feel about this stuff. We live in Alabama, so it didn't really feel like the cops would do anything because he technically did not shoot anyone and I wouldn't know who exactly he threatened. And right after that, I mean, it's just crazy. Why do people not call the police in these posts ever? No one in these Reddit posts ever called the police. This guy was threatening to blow someone's brains out, acting crazy, and you don't call the police? Come on. But now let's get into the comments. Someone says, that's extremely alarming and completely inappropriate. Anyone would be scared in that situation. And the OP responds saying, he's been put on leave and they're going to have a meeting with him Sunday and probably a drug test. Another commenter says, I don't know your manager, but maybe they thought that you might be scared, so played it down a lot. If they reacted badly, it might have scared you more. As a manager before, I would have said something like this as not to alarm people while smashing the secret panic button. Like, yeah, everything is fine. See you later. Have a good night. And then deal with it away from them. But like I said, I don't know them or if that's the case here. And then the OP responds saying, probably. I had a lot of trouble sleeping tonight and have dreaded coming in today. Still a little scared he'll show up since I'm the only employee in the evening, but my front desk manager assured me he will be dealt with. And then there's a lot of comments asking on if the OP can find another job to put some distance for her own safety. And the OP responds saying, well, all my previous jobs were fast food. My first job's manager would scream every day to the point where I had stomach problems from the stress, and my second stole money from me. Whole other can of worms. The maintenance man honestly acted like a normal man until last night, so I don't blame them from hiring him. I'm just a bit frustrated at the text. I'm going to consider asking for a transfer depending on what happened Sunday, and I'm going to talk with my therapist/support group about what I should do next. Another commenter said, that's super concerning. You did a good job telling multiple managers. You handled the situation really well. I'm also a 19-year-old female, and I would have been petrified as well. And then the OP responds saying, I told my grandma, and she was like, did you have your mace? And I said, yes, grandma, but what would a mace do against a man with a gun? Another commenter says, I'd be quitting without notice. And honestly, I'd suggest that be what you do. With a response like this, I wouldn't feel safe working there either, and I'm a 26-year-old woman. A 19-year-old should definitely not have to deal with an individual like this. And then the OP responds saying, other than this incident, I've really enjoyed working at a hotel. I've definitely considered this, however, I do want to move next year, and since I'm so young, I want to get as much hotel experience as possible so I could continue hospitality when I move 6 hours away. This all happened last night, so I'm still considering my options. Someone else says, so you were scared enough to hide from him, but not scared enough to protect the patrons? Got it. And that was a downvoted commenter, by the way. And the OP said, the police didn't do shit when they were here to help. And what am I going to do against a deranged man with a gun when I have nothing? I cannot knock on every door and potentially trigger him into more rage. And I don't want to leave people stranded when they are traveling when he said he's about to leave. At the time, my thought process was, wow, I can't just call the cops and say he's scary since he didn't threaten me. He threatened someone else. And it's a he said, she said type of thing. So if nothing comes of it, the police will leave again and I'll be left here with a crazy man. And to be honest, I have to disagree with the OP there. I think calling the cops would have 100% been the right move. I mean, of course it would be a he said, she said, but there's going to be cameras in the hotel for sure. They might have audio and they're going to see that you're telling the truth, and no one can be saying in a public setting, I'm going to blow someone's brains out because they're fiddling with my door handle or whatever. You can't be saying that. That's deranged. And this guy has a gun. Call the cops. But then people are questioning, why didn't the OP call 911? And the OP responds saying, I did when there was reports of someone pounding and screaming profanities on the 4th floor. The police came and did nothing. When the police came, they said, hey, we spoke to the guy who made the report and the maintenance man, and they both said they heard it, but it stopped. He never directly threatened me, just talked about how he was about to / wanted to shoot someone. Alabama is very lenient on gun laws, and the cops didn't take me seriously the first time, so in the moment, I didn't know what good it would be if they came back. And once again, I completely disagree with the OP here. Yes, some states are very lenient on gun laws in the United States, but they're not lenient enough to be like, oh yeah, this guy threatened to shoot someone, we're not going to do anything about it. Like, threatening to shoot someone is way different than just lenient gun laws. I think the OP 100% should have called the cops, but you know, you live, you learn. And then the OP posts an update 2 days later, and the update reads as follows. I'd like to start this post by thanking people for being so supportive in my last post. I was stressed out my entire Christmas shift, and you all made me feel less crazy. I came up with a plan when I walked in today to ask to be transferred to day shift or to be transferred to another hotel. When I asked my front desk manager, she said she couldn't put me solely on mornings until we got busy again. In response, I brought up how uncomfortable I was with the maintenance man situation, and she assured me Chris was gone. I asked how that was assured, and she told me not to tell people, but Chris essentially skipped town and is now in a facility. I have no idea what kind of facility, but all I know is he's gone. I don't know if I want to take any further action, but for now, this has put me at ease. For those in my last post angry about me not being able to protect the guests, I want to try to put this into perspective. When Chris was threatening people with a gun, he did not tell me who he was threatening, and I couldn't go around calling each guest, as that would have caused a panic for the guests. And the cops already seemed irritated that I didn't have enough information about the situation the first time I called the police. He was about to leave, so if I called the police again, he would be gone by the time the cops could arrive. I called my manager instead of the police when he was ranting to me about him almost blowing someone's brains out, so management would firsthand see how insane he was reacting, since he had never displayed any of this behavior before. If my manager had told me to call the cops, I absolutely would have. I care about my guests, and my main concern was to not set him off and to quietly ensure he left. And with the resources I had, the best way to ensure that was to let him leave by myself. I don't know how many of you actually live in the South, but from my understanding living here, reporting his behavior is more complicated than you think. Alabama is a free to carry state, and you don't even need a permit to carry. There is no sign on the property stating guns aren't allowed, so he wasn't breaking the rules by having the gun on his person. There was no cameras where he told me he threatened someone with a gun. If I did somehow tell the police, it would be a, hey, Chris said he did this, but then I have no actual evidence or proof it happened besides the noise complaint. I might not have handled this in a way some would have liked me to, but please understand that I'm a 19-year-old with their first big person job in a situation I've never had to conceptualize before. None of my actions were out of malice. My actions were trying not to escalate or provoke a man with a gun. And I get what the OP is saying there. And I mean, I can relate. I'm 19 years old. I'm young. But still, it's like, it doesn't matter if it's a he said, she said, and you don't have evidence. You're still creating a paper trail and being like, hey, he threatened people with a gun and says he's going to kill somebody. Like, whether or not it's a free carry state or you don't even need a permit to carry, you can't just go around saying you're going to shoot people, whether or not it's that sort of state. And so I understand what the OP is saying, but at the same time, she should have called the police again. Even if there is no evidence, it's very important that she's a witness. It's not like they're not going to just completely disregard her, especially after he said, I'm going to blow someone's brains out. Maybe I'm not completely correct, but comment down below if I'm a little bit right on this, or if you agree with me, or am I wrong and the police would have just disregarded it. I don't know, but I think it's at least worth having the police around just in case he comes back and says something similar to that or does something this time. But you know, I'm not going to just completely rag on the OP. I totally understand it's a scary situation and she was disheartened by the earlier police situation, so I totally understand what happened, but I just think it's would have been better if she called the police. And I read a ton of these Reddit stories where people don't call the police and something ends up happening, and it would have just been better if they called the police, if that makes sense. But now the OP gives us an update 3 weeks later. Hey Reddit, since the situation has finally died down, I'd figure I'd give one last update. In my last post, I said Chris was gone because that's what my front desk manager told me. So imagine my surprise when I came in a few days later to a meeting with the general manager just to be told that not only was Chris not in a facility, but that he still works here, and how she was not planning to get rid of him. It started out as a meeting about trafficking, as a guest checked out at 4 a.m. and left his keys on the counter, and a few minutes later, a random man not staying at the hotel grabbed the keys and went into the checked out guest dirty room. The incident happened on the 27th, 4 days after the whole Christmas Eve situation with Chris. Tell me why the GM used this as an excuse for Chris's actions. I asked her what I should do in cases like that night, since Chris could easily get into the office. She told me that Chris was in the building currently, and that he was just mad, and people act differently sometimes whenever they are mad. And this incident with the room happened on the same day. Complete lie, by the way, so maybe he had a reason to threaten people with guns. By the end of the meeting, I broke down crying. She told me she didn't know keeping Chris employed here would cause this much of a reaction, and how she can't just fire someone because they scared you, and then promised she'd just schedule me and Chris on different days. I went home after that because I was so upset that a man who was that unstable and threatening people with guns at his place of work would still be around and facing no consequences, from what I've seen. Cut to the next time I come in and Chris clocks in. The promise to schedule us on different days was a complete fucking lie. I told the owner about what happened, which went to hospitality. I don't know if these things are slow or if they didn't do anything either, but I'm not sticking around. I quit. I found a job that's a bit more of a drive but will ultimately pay me more. My last day is next week. Front desk manager understands why I'm leaving and says she would too in my situation. The general manager cut my hours. She started cutting my hours a week before I turned in my 2 weeks. Chris wanted to apologize to me, but both managers told him not to talk to me. So yeah, that's about it. I'm stepping back from hotel work and going into marketing. Fuck Alabama and fuck the general manager for not only putting my life at risk, but also everyone else by keeping that man. I liked my job before this, and it's upsetting how little was done about this situation. And I completely agree with the OP there. I mean, they just were not listening to the OP at all. Like, they couldn't even schedule them on different days. And then it's totally understandable why the OP quit here, because I would feel completely unsettled as well if I was working with the guy who threatened to blow someone's brains out or blow anybody's brains out, whatever he said, which is obviously crazy. I mean, I think it's crazy how he wasn't fired, let alone arrested for threatening to kill somebody. But yeah, just such a wild situation. But luckily,